Good morning. The next speaker is a keynote speaker of today, Professoressa Inverardi, that we see here. And I just remember and give some information about her. She is a computer scientist. We have had some problem family now, and she graduated the University of Pisa, and from 1994 she come back in l'Aquila, and she contributed to found and also to develop the course of computer science and also informatics. Then after that, she became director of the Department of Mathematics and Informatics here at the University of l'Aquila, and then she became rector of the same institution. Since then, in 2013, Professor Inverardi contributed to found the Gran Sasso Science Institute that now is driving and is now the rector of the same institution. In her career, Professoressa Inverardi authored hundreds of international publications, and mainly in the field of software engineering. For her research activity, Professoressa Inverardi received in 2013 the IEEE TCSCE Distinguished Service Award. She is a member of the European Association for Computer Machinery, and today Professor Inverardi will present a talk entitled Remaining Human in a Digital Activity. I leave the floor to Professor Inverardi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning, and I'm happy that you survived the Thursday evening in l'Aquila, which is always a tough night, tough evening. You probably have seen, I mean, these hundreds of people strolling around the town till very late at night. So, I mean, I'm glad you are here this morning. So, remaining human in a digital society. First of all, I mean, I thank to Giuseppe who introduced me. I'm a computer scientist, but in particular, I'm a software engineer. So in all my life, I've been working with software, in particular at the software architecture level. So I'm interested in the way we can decompose and put together complex systems, in particular systems that interact each other and have autonomous components. Now, you may ask yourself why this title and what is the talk about, and that's so the motivation is that we are, already entered a period in which we are surrounded by autonomous systems, digital systems, and these systems make part of our ordinary life in what I call the digital world. And there has been a lot of attention, we will dig into it later on, about the impact of these systems and our individual rights, but more in general, the impact on the society. So there is this feeling of harm of a digital society for the human being society, and there has been an increasing, growing interest in a quest for an ethical approach. Now we will try to see what does this mean, in particular in Europe. Now, to some extent, my view is biased towards the European view. On the other hand, Europe, it has been at the front end of this elaboration in terms of digital systems and societal effects. And then I will talk about, okay, what does it mean to embed ethics in autonomous systems, but not in the classical way that we have been seeing in the agent community or in the robot community, rather trying to understand what's the impact for humans. And I have this notion of human in the center, which is not human in the loop, I said yesterday. It's human at the center. We'll see later on. And then I will talk about our approach, which is based on this digital ethics introduced by Luciano Floridi, and give a motivating example, and then I will show you, I will end up with our project, which is an umbrella project that has a very, very visionary goal and in which a very multidisciplinary team collaborates. And I will end up with the challenges. Now, the highlights are that there is this pervasiveness of digital technologies, and we are surrounded by this system that have different degrees of autonomy. And many times, I mean, this autonomy may challenge the centrality of our human sphere of decisions. And to some extent, the idea that we are moving in a world in which the reference points are not only human is something that on one side it's scary. I'm giving a lot of talks. I'm invited to, and interviews and talks about this kind of issues. And there is always this, now with ChatGPT and generative AI, it's even worse. But there is always this worry for ordinary people of what can happen in the future to these poor human beings. I'll try to elaborate more. The risks are, obviously privacy. You are a community that have, probably impacted on privacy and ethical issues a lot. But there is also this more general concept of human dignity. And of course, we experience bias in decision system, in recommending system. And also, I mean, we are witnessing the fact that our space for individual decisions is reducing. Whether this is something that we like or not, it is one of the purposes of this talk. I mean, try to understand if we really like it, and to some extent, how much do we want to have it. And then, of course, there are ethical concerns. I mean, in certain domain, like this domain, the domain of this community, ethical concerns are at stake. I mean, it's, it's something that you experience from the very beginning, from the very first moment that you plan an experiment. You have to take into consideration that your counterpart, your main stakeholders, is the human being, and then you need to go through ethical consideration. We'll try to also understand better which kind of... Now, the whole purpose of the talk is to say, okay, but can technology help us as human beings? Can this same technology that scares us, can actually help us to remain human? And I hope to convince you. Okay, ethics, everybody knows about what is ethics. This is just a slide to just set the context. And what is interesting is not the first part, but the second part, many ethics. I mean, there are many different ways of interpreting our way of making decisions in terms of what is good and what is bad. How many? You may ask, how many ethics are around? I mean, in principle, infinite. Each one of us has its own ethics. Now, we might try to decompose these ethics in parts and see which part is more general, which part is more individual. We'll go on it later. But in general, I mean, there are many ethics, and what philosophers do, I mean, they try to categorize. They try to split, to group, to cluster things so that they can identify disposition of people towards one way of reasoning with respect to others. Now, ethics allows us to answer to these fundamental questions, and it's I'm not going to go too deep in that. While, so why are we talking about ethics in technology? This is an evergreen question. It's nowadays, again, I mentioned the generative AI. There is a huge debate. Every day there is some kind of institutional body that comes up with a statement on it. So it's really now exploding, also in terms of reaction. And of course, I mean, the impact in society of technology is in general very widespread. I mean, just again, just concentrate on generative AI is not only the worries about the societal impact, what they do, what you can do with generative AI, but also in terms of energy consumptions, but also in terms of, for example, water consumption. There has been an article a few weeks ago which was on Archive, talking about the amount of fresh water that is needed to train a generative AI algorithm like ChatGPT-3. 700,000 liters of fresh water for cooling the data centers that we used to train. So, I mean, if you look at these kind of things in general, I mean, they impact many, many dimensions. Now, in computer science and AI, of course, I mean, the data economy forced us to think more and more about privacy, and privacy is a dimension of ethics. And the emergence of autonomous technology and AI itself, instead, put forward questions that are more general than privacy, but actually are ethical in sense that they impact a set of moral values. So how do we care? We have ethics in profession. I mean, we have all these ethical codes. We have ethics in the use of IT technology. So we know that, for example, we do user profiling for privacy. We have to think about ethical impacts. When we can have bias in our tools, in our technology because of data and so on. And we try to struggle with these kind of things in the technology. And of course, you have ethics in the IT system itself. So if you think of a robot, and the robot has to take a decision in a situation in which there are different moral point of view that might lead to a decision or another, you have to equip your robot with some kind of default ethics. And this is what we call machine ethics. So there is also the problem of embedding in the system some kind of system ethics. So autonomous technologies. What's the point with autonomous technology from my point of view? I mean, autonomous technology were born thinking of, to some extent, let me simplify, get rid of the human. So from an historical perspective, there was a system which had a limited scope of view of a context, and an operator. And this operator was a human being that was actually providing the information to the system that the system needed in order to make its work. Now, making the system more autonomous means that we try to get rid more and more of the human. And how do we do that? If the human was supplying data, now we can, in terms of the system, with IoT, with communication primitives and so on, we can sense what before the human was giving. We can sense if some kind of exceptional situation is happening, and so on and so forth. So basically, I mean, we are trying to get rid of the human. Fine. Perfect. This is good, so far so good. What is that we don't like? We don't like when this autonomy becomes proactive, in the sense that the system is so smart that actually anticipates what the user might want to do, and say, okay, I'll do it on your behalf. Again, fine. If it is a washing machine, who cares? Already, I mean, your mobile phone is bothering, no? That from time to time you get in the car on Friday afternoon, this happens to me, it might happen to everybody, you get in the car and then immediately pop up a message, okay, it will take 1 hour and a half to reach that place, which is the place where I go on Friday afternoon. Fine, but who asked you? I mean, it's some, and then this was just a notice, but it might act on your behalf. I do it on your behalf. And at that point, I mean, things becomes a little bit less obvious. Because the system might invade user prerogatives, I will give you examples, and this might impact privacy and ethics, and maybe. Now, okay, typical autonomous system, autonomous cars, robots, but, as I said, washing machines, and, for example, queuing systems. Now we will have an example about queuing system. We have more and more smart queuing systems that are proactively organizing your time if you are waiting for some kind of service. So you get in, you identify, all your data are collected, and then you get a message on your phone saying, okay, come back at this time, or I'll send you a message 15 minutes before, the estimated time is this one. In the meanwhile, you can go around and see this and that. I'm not talking of, I'm talking of something that a colleague of ours did for Galleria degli Uffizi. So I'm not talking of something that, no? Just to avoid the queuing, if you want to visit in Florence, Galleria degli Uffizi, they set up a queuing system which is very smart, which has a lot of data, of course, I mean, and it tries to predict your waiting time and say, okay, instead of queuing here, you can go to visit Boboli, you can go to do this and that, it takes only 20 minutes, and then come back at this time, or when I will give you a message. So, nice. We'll see why I might not be. Okay, so we can have very different perspective of looking at this problem in general. No? You can have a philosophical perspective, you have a definition of privacy, you have many, the question mark for philosophies means, for ethics means that you can have many, many different ways of talking of different ethics. You can have a regulatory point of view. For example, for privacy in Europe we have GDPR, in other countries there are other legislation. We recently approved the AI Act as Europe, so it's the first country all over the world that was trying to regulate AI systems and the use of AI systems and the commercialization of AI systems. And you can have the technical perspective, which is our own perspective. No? I mean, how do we try to preserve privacy? So we have, for example, privacy by design, we have a lot of control systems and this kind of stuff, and we might think that we can also, and actually there have been proposals to do ethics by design, trying to elicit what are the ethical requirements for your system, and then having a process that actually drives you. IEEE has proposed one that drives you into the development of a system, so that at the end the ethical concerns are at least guaranteed by the process. So privacy, okay, you all know, this was just an example to show the two perspectives. And the technical perspective is very wide. We have been working a lot in terms of, as a community, in terms of privacy. Probably without having the awareness that we were actually talking of an ethical dimension. But just because we were talking of privacy as some kind of techno-social problem, but not as an ethical dimension of an individual, which is the perspective that I try to. Now, Europe has done a lot of work, starting from a few years ago. I mean, a lot of work on the harm, potential harm of autonomous systems to the society in terms of the ethical values of a society. And this is just a quote from an old, it's 2018, old report of the European Group on Ethics in Science and New Technologies. Europe has been very active. It has set up a lot of institutional intermediate bodies that have been elaborating multidisciplinary with philosophers, computer scientists, law specialists, psychologists, and so on and so forth. And what is interesting here is the last part. The last part says, this underlines the need for a collective, wide-ranging and inclusive process of reflection and dialogue, a dialogue that focuses on the values, ethics, around which we want to organize society, and here they are talking of a digital society, and on the role that technologies should play in it. So there is the recognition that the future society will have as actors not only the human being part, but also the technological part. And this is important because it's a shift of perception. It's not just technology that we use that help us to live, but actually autonomous technologies are technologies that live beside us, with us. So how do we embed ethics in autonomous systems? Of course, there have been a lot of work. If we look at this problem now, how can autonomous systems take decisions? I mean, robots have a way to do that. Autonomous vehicles, there have been a lot of debate, a lot of research, a lot of discussion. In the queuing systems, how do we do? And are there ethical concerns? Now, basically, it means that we have to provide the technology with its own ethics to support the decision making. There have been a lot of work in the agent and robot community, and here I have just one very general reference. How and when this decision is made, normally again in an architecture of autonomous agent, normally you have all these pieces of information that come in. You have a reasoner that it's normally an artificial intelligence reasoner. Then these reasoners may come out with one possible action to perform. The action in this proposal goes through an ethical-based reasoner that will try to understand if the action actually is possible, depending on the value of the system, of the stakeholders, and so on and so forth. It's not an easy process, it's a complex process. In the area of autonomous car, there have been a lot of work on these trolley problem scenarios. Notably, there has been this very nice experiment conducted at MIT that was called the moral machine. You may know about it. The moral machine was actually the first empirical philosophical experiment, large scale, that we know and that we can refer to. It collected 40 million, I don't know how many. Did you try the moral machine? It's very interesting. So basically, as a user, you are confronted with a set of scenarios that are all in the kind of trolley problem. I mean, they exemplify very, very extreme scenarios, no? That you are driving the car, or the car is autonomous, it's driving. It can only do two things. On one way, it can kill the young people. On the other way, it can kill the senior people. What should the car do? And you have to answer. And then there are a lot of these kind of scenarios. And they collected 40 million of answers, 40 million, all over the world. The experiment tried to understand if it was possible to define a universal ethics for autonomous car. Universal means that could hold everywhere in the world. Of course, no. The result was that, of course, no. Obviously, there are very different behavior. depending on where you are, depending on your culture, depending on... So it's not possible to have a universal ethics. And this is a result, an unexpected result, you may say, but it's a result, an empirical validated result. I'll come back to that then. So, I mean, where are we in all this discussion? Where are the human? So, to some extent, we have this feeling of being a danger, and I would like to know how many of you do feel comfortable even with its own phone. Now, I changed the phone. I have another phone. It's not an iPhone. It's a Samsung. I cannot tame it. It does things, and I do not know how to block it. I mean, try to get rid of things, and then they pop up again. And it's really, you know, it's challenging. So I know that I'm not controlling my devices. Not even able to, I mean, I have to switch it off. Maybe. Maybe. No, not sure that it works. But so we do not feel very comfortable with many of these devices. But this is unavoidable. I mean, we all now live in this society. Nobody of us will step backward. So we have to accept the evidence that we are surrounded by autonomous technologies, and we need to understand what we can do, actually, to live comfortably in this world. We are in the mangrove society, as Luciano Floridi says. Luciano Floridi is a very well-known philosopher. He's in Oxford now, he's also in Bologna, and he's one of the first ones that has thought of the internet society, of what the digital technology could, how could the digital technology impact society. And he calls our society the mangrove society. Why the mangrove societies? Because the mangroves are trees that live in a very special ecosystem. The very special ecosystem is that they live in the water. But is it salted? Is it sweet? Is it not salted? Is it not sweet? It's the ecosystem in which the mangrove lives. And this is the metaphor of our digital society. Are we online? Are we offline? Are we a little bit online, a little bit offline? And that's, we are in our mangrove society, so we cannot actually distinguish what is online, what is offline. And I mean of our ordinary life. I mean relationships, I mean work, I mean preferences about what we would like to read or to see or to view. So it's our life, which is, sorry. Then more recently there were with ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI, again from another body, UI level expert group on AI. And here, of course, this was also inspiring for the AI Acts, but here I just would like to what is in red, it's being aligned with agreed ethical principles and values, including privacy, fairness, human dignity. Now human dignity appears at the same level of privacy and fairness. And then keeping us, the humans, in control. So these are among the recommendations for building trustworthy AI. And it's the objective that we would like to achieve. Then, okay, transparency and robustness and so on and so forth, that we understand it much better, but... So, can we try to think of a different approach than just relying on the fact that the people who build the AI system are so morally good that they will do their best to adhere to the principles that we just read? Maybe we have to take a different approach. We cannot actually rely on that. No, would be, putting trust not exactly in the hands of whose trust should be. It's our own life. So, I mean, in general, among human beings, we are very carefully in putting trust on somebody else. And it doesn't last for too long in general. So, I mean, that's another issue. Now, what do we mean with human at the center? So it's, again, the European Group on Ethics in Science and New Technology, they were coming up with this more verbal notion of human dignity, saying the principle of human dignity understood as the recognition of the inherent human state of being worthy of respect must not be violated by autonomous technologies. So they tried to make clear what does it mean to preserve human dignity. It means that the technologies, the autonomous technology, need to respect the humans. And what does it mean to respect the humans? Very, very simple-minded, a very simple-minded answer might be, okay, that they do not take decision on behalf of the user that the user would not take, or that they do not act when interacting with the user in a way that the user might not accept as the right way of. Just think of care robots. So care robots have to do with very different people, and each one of us may have, each one of the people they are caring of might have a different perception of what does it mean human dignity. What does it mean that they want to be respected? And how can we manage this? So, of course, accept, not accept options do not satisfy our freedom of choices, no? Because we would really want to have individual preferences and individual moral views to be preserved. As a matter of fact, individuals are not protected. I mean, this is an uneven relationship. In the present world, even with my phone, I have an uneven relationship. I have no control on it. And I'm not able to actually control. I do not have the knowledge, I do not have the sense of what it's doing. It's uneven. So we are having an interaction, but I'm like blind as a human being. So the point is exactly, how can we do something in order to make all the situation a little bit more even? Now, it is more than having humans as explicit components of the system, the human in the loop. It's more than that. We're not talking of having the human in the loop. It's not that kind of stuff. But it's about lifting humans to be actors in the digital world by becoming, what I say, autonomous systems that interact au pair. So it means that we should be equipped with something that allows us to interact au pair. And what can we do? To empower the user? How can we equip the user with something? And to some extent. Now, we have to understand how can we distinguish in between what is an individual preference and what is instead something that the society has set and it's like a general law or something like that. Here we rely on the notion of digital ethics as defined by Luciano Floridi. And here I'm simplifying, so if somebody of you has a philosophical background, please. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, so it's my view of things. But so basically, Luciano Floridi says that digital ethics can be roughly divided in two parts. Hard ethics, that is the part of the ethics that is enforced and defined by digital legislation or by, societal rules that we all adhere to. But however, hard ethics cannot cover everything and should not cover everything. There is a huge space of decision that is left to our own personal values. And that space of decision is called soft ethics. So it's where we exercise our right of taking decision, following our own moral, our own views. Okay? There is no rule that tells us to do this or that, but we do it. We'll have an example in a while. So let's go back to the automated queuing system. So imagine that the system registers users and downloads users' information. So you get in, you put in your card, for example, your health card. The system, based on the data, it predicts the waiting time and sends a message to the user when the time is approaching. So far so good. I get in, I put my card in the machine does everything, and then I go away. And then, I get an answer, say, okay, more or less you will have this, but in any case you will get a message, ciao, ciao. And then, what does the user to do? The user registers and provides the telephone number, so it's giving a piece of information. But imagine now this situation, that when exiting the registration room, this specific user sees somebody entering who might be in need to be served earlier. Now, in a normal world, in a world without automation, we would simply say, go. Somebody of us will say go. Some other will say nothing, just get out. It's in the space of our moral rights. It's in the space of our own values that are different. And there is no law that says that what we do is good or bad. It's simply our way of being. It's what makes us interesting. We are different. So, is it possible to exchange position with the person in need? Of course, from a technological point of view, it's something very stupid. There is no reason why not to allow it. But the system should have been programmed that way. There should have been the concern that different users may have different ways of expressing their decision, and there should be also in the system the ability to understand what are decisions that the system can do because of the hard ethics, and what are decisions that instead might change because of the user and the interaction with the user. So what I'm saying here is that the idea of putting human at the center requires to have a certain level of customization or enforcing of a decision of the autonomous system. It means that I would like the system to understand my value, no? And then act coherently with my value every time the decision the system is taking are actually in the sphere of the soft ethics. Of course, soft ethics has to be consistent with hard ethics. I mean, it's, if there is, the hard ethics says not kill, it's not that my soft ethics I say kill, no? That's evidently, no? And of course, individuals use different ethics depending on the context and depending on their personal data and so on. So we also learn that the idea from this very simple example that soft ethics is associated with individuals, hard ethics to systems. Of course, systems might also they have to make decisions even when the user does not want to override the decision with its own way of looking at it. So they are also equipped with a default soft ethics. The two in general need to combine in a sort of moral agreement, and then they can interact. And the way we approach this problem is at an architectural level, so we actually work thinking that this kind of interactions are mediated at the architectural level of a system. This is a very short view of how the soft ethics and hard ethics are distributed among the autonomous systems and the user. So what we do, and this is more or less the end of the story. We have this very big project which is called the ExoSoul, and it's basically the idea to provide humans with a software exoskeleton. And the software exoskeleton is what empowers the users and allows the user to express her moral view when interacting with the system. So I can make a very trivial example. We all experience the effect of GDPR, no? On our ordinary life, in our interaction with web systems, for example. I mean, GDPR imposed that we have to provide consent to cookies, no? And then we can discuss about the validity or not of a consent protocol, but this is something that, you know, in law they are actually discussing. But as a matter of fact, for us, what does it mean? It means that we are presented with something and we have to set our preferences. Now, there are many different ways in which the systems are presenting things. We might not have time, we might not understand what, and at the end, what we end up, we also, the technical people, accept all or refuse all, or just try another website, no? And that's not a fair interaction. That's not what the law intended to have. So what if I had a piece of software which is mine, personal, which is part of my personal exoskeleton that I deploy on my phone, on my devices, and that helps me in selecting and setting the preferences as I wish to do. It learns from me, it learns what I do, and then it does it autonomously. So it's an autonomous technology for me. It's my autonomous technology. So that's the idea. So the idea is that the exoskeleton is the vision is that it's a holistic piece of software that mediates all your interactions with the digital world, whatever system you're interacting with. But as a matter of fact, it's made of pieces of software that help you and that can rely on your moral preferences. So that's the idea from an architectural point of view. I mean, we have the user, we have the autonomous system, and then we have this software that is around the system, around the user, and protects, filters, and acts on behalf of the user. And of course, knows the moral preferences of the user. This is a more general architectural view. Okay. Basically, the idea, so it's that the piece of exoskeleton is reflecting your soft ethics value, and it's personalized. And then when I interact with a system, for example, with the autonomous vehicle, I can actually deploy my soft ethics on the vehicle, and the vehicle can actually act when in the sphere of a decision that regard soft ethics can act as I wish, as I would react. This also means that the systems have to be willing to adapt, no? And that's a market law. I mean, as long as we will provide users with means that require different protocols for interaction, also the market will react accordingly. So if I say, okay, I do not interact with a system but does not accept the interaction with my personal preferences, then I don't use you. I use another system, and immediately the market will work. Okay, so I'm here skipping, just to say that this is an approach that we had, and basically it started from a technological point of view. I mean, we were thinking of that. But it's very interesting to see so basically what we say is that we have to mediate our interaction. How do we make this mediation? With a piece of software, with a piece of technology, with a system. But it's a personalized system. It's something which is close to the user. It's mine. It's my projection in the digital world. Now there is this paper. I mean, actually at Stanford they set up a group that was a multidisciplinary group, was discussing about the power of the big tech information monopoly companies. And what is nice is that these people that are also very famous and sociologists, I mean, it's completely different field. They come up with a solution that is technological. So at the end they said, yeah, we can have law, but, yes, we can have principle, but, yes, we can, nudge companies, but. So why don't we think of a technological solution? And the technological solution is to, is to actually rely on a middleware, and to some extent detach the profiling of the content and the information from the big company to third kind of company, third companies that actually can be trustable by the user, and the user can be profiled there, and are these middleware that then profile the content from the content company and give you the pieces of information that you need. So they are actually saying, okay, we have to put something in the middle that is not, but from an economic point of view, that is independent, and it's at the service of a user, not at the service of a company, which is to some extent the same kind of pattern that we are proposing. But it's interesting that at the end these people come up with a technical solution. Okay, many challenges you can imagine, how to express soft ethical preferences, how to automatize the exoskeleton production, what are the boundaries in between self and hard, many challenges, but what I would like to say here, it's a multidisciplinary effort across disciplines and inside computer science. So we need philosophers, sociologists, software engineers, and they have to work together. And of course we have to increase awareness in users and system producers. This is our team. Our team is in different colors, so we are computer scientists, philosophers, sociologists, psychologists, law professors, and we have PhD students. So far we have these two, now we will get in other three, but you may see that they have a very different culture. It took, we are working together since 2018, and we have of course produced something, but it took a lot to set up a common way of understanding, of language, of discussion, and it is very fruitful. It's challenging because it's not, you cannot publish immediately. So if we have a matrix of publishing, it takes time. So it takes, to us it took 3 years before we could actually publish something. So it's, and of course, I mean, here I provide some general references, and here there are our own references of the thing that we have produced so far. So my last word is that the exoskeleton is a piece of health system. You can talk about health system, but it's not to do with the body. It has to do with the soul. But it's still linked to human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Paola. I just ask you to take the microphone, the mobile microphone. Thank you. So I thank you, Paola, for this interesting, very interesting talk. And some of these issues are very, very important for the health community, particularly when digital. I don't know.
Here.
Okay. And these issues have to interrogate us, especially when these themes are applied to the medical field, I guess. And if you have any question?
Okay, good morning. Only a fast question, because you mentioned about the proposal of the European Union about how to about the regulation of IEEE. So my question is, do you think this proposal is realistic, mainly in ethical questions?
You mean the AI Act? I mean, of course, regulation is... so first of all, I mean, it's an attempt to address the issue that has to be regulated. I mean, there is no... I mean, my personal point of view is that there is no way, no other way to control what we are doing except having rules and regulations. So we have to go through regulation. This is important because it also represents the awareness of a society. So how much the society is aware of the potential effects of what we are actually doing. Now, if how at present the AI Act is structured, it's the right tool, we don't know. No? You know, the American view of the AI Act is, and I know because I'm in a committee, an ACM committee, the policy committee, in which they say this kind of thing that AI Act is the way Europe is actually facing the fact that it will never be leading the AI technologies. No, so I mean, just stop it. Which I don't think it's, I mean, it might be, but we cannot compete with the big players. But I think that Europe has a different attitude. It has really this individual, human-centric culture that wants to preserve. The AI Act now is structured around this notion of risks. And it takes a lot of work, additional work, to understand how effective it could be to certify the risks, to analyze the risks, to... So what you ask is very difficult. What I can say is that it's important that this step has been done. Now, as usual, rules and regulation will adapt and change and grow. So it's not the, no, it's not written in the stone. I mean, it's we'll see how it will evolve. But now maybe it's also inadequate with respect to what generative AI is actually producing, and no answer. I mean, that's I think. I'm not scared. I think there is no way. No, we will go through that path. Yes.
I was wondering what your opinion about this following matter would be. I guess that one part of this AI Act, as it pertained to medicine, I think one part of it was that they classified these clinical tasks into low risk and high risk clinical tasks. High risk would be closer to the patient, and they now require these high risk tasks to be accompanied by some level of explainability and transparency. But I think for now, these non-explainable models are way more developed than our capabilities of explaining them, especially from the point of view of mathematics and statistics. My point is, can we afford in medicine to wait for these explainable systems to catch up in terms of development? Or should we actually try to implement these higher accuracy models that might save more lives?
Yeah, again, this is a very important question. I mean, what you are asking is basically, to some extent, the American way of looking at the AI Act. No? Is it a regulation that will stop progress? Or is it a regulation that will try to control it without stopping it? Very difficult to say now. No? What we can say is that it can be very, very heavy to do, no? Obviously. And to some extent, we might not even be able to reach the level in which we are able to certify with certainty what we have done. But I think we have just to wait and see how we will be able to work with it. And now, look at GDPR. Now there was this very big debate when our data authority stopped ChatGPT in Italy. There was this, the authority wants to stop progress, wants to stop AI. As a matter of fact, it was simply trying to do its work. I mean, OpenAI was not clear about what they were doing with their data. Now, then they discussed, it's by approximation, this kind of things. If you leave everything open, of course, you have a lot of, the search space is much bigger, you might find many, many things, but on the other hand, you also have no means of control. So finding the right balance in between controlling but not limiting research and experimental approaches, but we have done with life science experiments, I hope, to some extent at least, I hope we will be able to manage also this.
Thanks, Paolo, for the great talk, and congratulations for the project. I think this ExoSoul is really amazing, this idea. And I'm wondering if you consider to use the ExoSoul to educate people about what can be done with the data. Because I think regulation is very important, and you say, okay, people have to consent about the use of their data, but actually if they don't know exactly what can be done, and usually, for example, if you have a system that could analyze, it could be bidirectional, not only passing the personal intents of the user, but also analyzing what data the other system is asking, and maybe educating the user about, okay, this is usually used for doing this, or at least it can be done according to the most recent scientific evidence. Do you think that could be a good idea, or are you planning to do that?
Yeah, we are also working on awareness, to some extent, how you can provide feedback to the user, that it's not only feedback, would you have done this or that, but look, doing that, it means that there can be these consequences, no? But there has been a lot of work also on this kind of explanatory feedbacks that can be counterproductive or productive, it depends on. So, but we are working on that direction, and I think that it's important. And I'm not saying, I mean, you see Apple, you see the advertisement, no? I mean, of iOS. The advertisement is, okay, you know what, have you seen the commercial? What's going on with your data? They have stolen this and that. Now they create all these scenarios and then say, but if you use Apple and iOS, everything will be okay because we take care of your privacy. So this is exactly what they do, also the big companies, no? And, but yes, in short, yes, we are working also on awareness tool, so tools that are part of your exoskeleton and help you understand it.
Thank you very much for all the words of warning and the obviously few words of hope. I wanted to add a question to the issue of explainability. Okay, here we are mostly computer scientists. I am excusing for those who are not. What should the other party know in order to explain a model to them? While this issue was brought forward, I thought of a colleague. All of us, I hope, know what a cluster is. The colleague, a clinician, told me when he saw the clusters, spare me, don't talk me about the math, just tell me they are correct, the clusters. Okay, and they were, of course, in a high-dimensional space. And now we are talking about explaining models which are doing causal relationships or are exploiting possibly causal relations, and where not all the variables and all the confounders can be captured. So to whom should we explain, and what should the person know?
Yeah, actually, this is one of the issue. Now, when you talk about explainability, you should have clearly who is the stakeholder. I mean, who are you explaining it? I mean, that has to be a first requirement of any explainability tool. Now, if you talk how can we explain to ordinary people the risk we have been thinking of, and there have been a lot of work also, especially in the privacy community, where they have been working a lot with the social experiments, trying to see how it works. And there, I think that you need a multidisciplinary approach. You need psychologists, you need sociologists. I mean, you need this kind of expertise, otherwise it's impossible. There is a nice work that analyzes, for example, all the systems that are nudging in privacy and security certain solutions, no? And which is a sort of, that's nudging, not explaining. Now, I mean, I try to push you gently towards what we think is the right way to do. But this is not exactly respecting what you want to do. It's just, you know, indeed it's called a paternalistic approach. So, again, I think that we have to engage with the society and with the people who have been studying the society in order to produce effective tools.
Yes, sorry, but our time is expiring. So I just have last consideration, if you allow me. The interesting idea of exosol is very good. How ethical it is?
Yeah,
is being a software.
We were discussing in the last meeting that in terms of the AI Act, exosol, the exoskeleton will be high risk, because it has to do with the personal preference of a human being. So I mean, but besides that fact,
it's a sort of shell.
It's a sort of shell. It's a sort of shell. Now, many times I get this question. Okay, but I will give to a software part of my moral values and so on. The point is not that you are giving to the software. The point is that the software is you. I mean, if we do not, then if you change way of looking at it, that the software is at your projection, so it's your, then we enter in how can we produce software which is that does not, augment the surface of attack, that is not, that is secure enough, that is trustable, and so on and so forth. But that's we are more or less able to do that. On the other hand, it's your own software. So I say it's like when you put an antivirus on your computer. Why do you trust the antivirus?
Yes.
You are downloading your antivirus on your computer. Why do you trust it? It's a piece of software. It's a market law. If the antivirus put a virus, you will never buy it again. So again, it's a rule of the market.
Yes. Thank you very much. Just a few moments, please. First, we want to acknowledge Paola with a little gift of the CBMS community. Thank you.
Grazie. Now I open it.
And the second one is that Rosa has some information.
But I show it, because I don't know if I... So thank you very much.
Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for being here. We can start with the first presentation. I would say the first bio presentation of today. So we have today 4 very interesting papers, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the papers and to hear from you. So what I want to ask is the first speaker, that is Dennis Cruz, and that will discuss the research paper entitled Secure FASTA, Ensuring Privacy and Trust when Sharing Genomic Data. Dini, The floor is yours.
First, hello everyone. My name is Dinis. I am a master's student in the University of Aveiro, and I had the pleasure of working with João Almeida, Jorge Miguel, and Professor João Luís Oliveira to produce this work, which is entitled Secure Fast, Ensuring Privacy and Trust when Sharing Genomic Information. Now, a little background on medical studies. There is a need for personal information, and the subjects will eventually give consent. This is how it works, the research studies. But this data is obviously personal, and because of this, there needs to be regulation and data governance to process this information and keep it secure. Because everyone, you know, famously Snowden says that no one cares about their data until something bad happens, and this is one of the cases. Now, these medical studies, the way they happen is still somewhat trivial. A researcher asks some data owner for a data set or a set of information, and the both of them discuss, you know, by email or some other platform, a confidentiality protocol. You're going to do this, I'm going to do that. We're going to share the information in this way, and eventually the researcher gets access to this information. Now, this information, as I said, is confidential or should be, and it is very sensitive and critical in nature. And since we are in the European Union, the GDPR protects this information as it should. And it creates a framework where users' data has rights and companies have obligations to those rights, which again makes sense considering the sensitivity of this information. No one wants, especially in this work which targets genomic information, they don't want for someone to identify that they have a certain disease or not. This is a question of privacy. So the motivation for this work is essentially that there have been advances in DNA sequencing which help with personalized medicine, target therapy, and improve diagnostics. And not only that, it also helps with, for example, our understanding of pollution. And sharing this information is vital. People have information, but maybe some other people want to do something else with it. This sharing of information is extremely important for future progress. However, the background I just gave you shows the sensitive nature of this information, and it needs to have a secure transmission point so no leaks are performed. As I've said, the researcher contacts, it's normally another researcher, but it can be a data owner, and they create a confidentiality protocol. Now, this protocol is not standardized, so we hope to create some sort of standard and security when performing this action. The work we produced was on a small set of files, which are called FASTA files. It's a text-based format for sharing nucleotide sequences or amino acid sequences. Now, this format basically indicates that the sequence is starting with a greater than sign, which has an header, and the rest is the sequence. As you can see with the close-up, normally the header has the greater than sign, and eventually it has a name and some other properties, alongside with the sequence that it is to be analyzed. This is basically our proposal, which has total encryption, where you encrypt both the header and the sequence, or, which is one of the objectives of this work, would be to only encrypt the sequence or to only encrypt the header. Maybe the sequence doesn't have any problems if no one knows what it is about, and maybe it's the other way around. The scheme we propose is cemented on two types of encryption, asymmetric and symmetric. Now, this produces a balance between the efficiency we want when encrypting the file and the need for sharing of a key. And for symmetric encryption, which provides the efficiency on the encryption, we use IEEE 256, which provides a solid base for cryptographic encryption, and it is robust against dictionary attacks if the key is random, which is why each file that we encrypt has a cryptographically securely generated random key. For asymmetric encryption, we use RSA, and basically we support this work on the premise that there is a trusted third party which manages these keys, and they are already distributed previously. As anything which has to do with encryption, there needs to be some sort of key management. Now, as I've said, this work cements itself with leaving the PKI infrastructure to another party. This is not our objective. However, since we are encrypting the files using IEEE, there is a need for this key to be managed properly. And the way we do this is we create a key which is cryptographically secure, and we do this based on randomness. Now, randomness in computers is a far interesting topic and way too long to cover here, but essentially there is pseudo random numbers which are created in a deterministic way, making their randomness a little bit suspect. So we must use true randomness, which comes from elements from the operating system, like temperature and stuff like that. And most operating systems, based on Linux or Windows, they have functions for this. So our work has the small limitation of only providing security in this sense if the operating system also provides this type of security. So we have a FASTA file, it's encrypted, and we send it. Now, there is security on the researcher's endpoint and on the other researcher's endpoint, but what about the transit? We don't create a secure channel. We don't know how they're going to share this information. Maybe it's by email, maybe it's, I don't know, any other protocol that they choose to use. So the data can be intercepted by an attacker. And if it is, and if something changes, this implies that the researcher who's getting the information can be getting wrong information, maybe get no information at all. So there needs to be some kind of integrity control. And we provide this by hashing the contents of the file, which creates essentially a fingerprint for the file, and we send this along with the key. So the final protocol is we have an asymmetric key on the sender side, and we encrypt it with their public key, so they only them can decrypt with their private key. This work was validated using different files of different sizes, and while we didn't use any massive sequences, it's one of the reasons why we use symmetric encryption, because files can be very large and asymmetric encryption of this type of information would be very difficult. We tested for resistance to tampering. This checksum that we do with the integrity control. As soon as something is changed, an error is flagged, and whichever party is alerted that something was altered. Finally, we produced some testing with dictionary attacks. This was just to make sure, because we create random keys. They are not present in any database leaks of passwords or anything, but it was robust against this type of testing. So in the end, we get an open source application developed in Python, and it has a command line usage. You can find it on GitHub, and we Dockerized it for further implementation in different systems if anyone wants to use it in different environments. With this work, we believe that sharing genomic information has been facilitated in the sense of creating security in the transmission. There are other works that should be done to provide this type of infrastructure, but we believe we have done some work in extending the security of the process. And essentially for future work, what we hope to do is, again, like I've said, there is no PKI public infrastructure implemented alongside with our work, so that can be one of the future things we implement. And we would like to incorporate this tool in the pipelines of the GDI project, which is the Genomic Data Infrastructure project in the EU. Thank you so much for listening. I am open to any questions and would love to get some. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Denis, and thank you for being in time. And so, question, comments, suggestion, please.
Okay. Essentially, I guess you could create different levels of confidentiality. Maybe it makes sense for someone in an administrative position to know that this sequence arrived and it has this information because it's present on the other. But that person has no need to know about the sequence, only the researcher. I guess that's the normal application. I would agree though that encrypting only the header and leaving the sequence in plain text probably has much less of a universe in terms of applications. I don't know if that answered. Thank you.
Other questions? Actually, I have one or two curiosities.
Please.
I was wondering how much time does the encryption require on a FASTA file, especially in when you treat with special genomes like huge genomes like the human genome, and how much is the additional load in the final FASTA file that you obtain after the encryption if you evaluated this aspect?
I don't think I understood the second part of the question.
How much, suppose at the beginning, before the encryption, you have a FASTA file of 3 gigabytes, for example. Yes. At the end, how much is the additional load?
There is no additional load. The encryption is not one-to-one because it works on blocks, like 32. It's 16-byte blocks. Mm-hmm. Of course, if the data if the data is not exactly in 16-byte blocks, we're going to have to pad it a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's like less than 16 bytes. So at the end, if it's a 3 gigabyte file, the difference is negligible. Okay. The performance you were asking, yeah. I would think that while we did not perform any tests, the symmetric encryption is very fast. I wouldn't say it is instant, mm-hmm. but because this is a cryptographic standard that is implemented in most processors these days, it's super low level, the computations it does, so it's going to be basically instantly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Denis, for your insights, and I ask for the second speaker. It is Andrea Alvarez Perez that will present the paper entitled Exploring Disease Drug Pairs in Clinical Trials Information for Personalized Drug Repurposing. Okay, Andrea, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrea Alvarez. I'm here to present our recent work, Exploring Disease Drug Pairs in Clinical Trials Information for Personalized Drug Repurposing. Okay. I will start with a brief introduction to the topic, then I will continue with the methodology, results, conclusions, and then some limitations and future work. So, starting with the introduction. Drug repurposing, it's the strategy in which you give new uses to already existing and approved drugs. This has become a promising strategy over the novel drug discovery, as it reduces not only pharmaceutical research, but also costs, timelines, and risk. On a different note, clinical trials are studies which try to test a certain drug to treat a disease in a specific subgroup of patients. And it's based on the premise that individuals exhibit distinct and intricate features based on at a molecular, physiological, environmental, or behavioral level. Also, we can talk about clinicaltrials.gov, which is a web-based resource that provides easy access to information on publicly and privately supported clinical studies on a wide range of diseases. And nowadays, it counts with more or less 400,000 studies performed in around 200 countries. And with the aim of extending the use of this platform and perform some aggregate analysis, the AACT was created, which stands for the Aggregate Analysis Clinical Trials, and it's a PostgreSQL database which downloads the content of clinicaltrials.gov daily. So, these clinical trials play a crucial role on precision medicine. The aim of precision medicine is to diagnose patients and prescribe drugs tailored to the individual's molecular biology of their disease. However, nowadays medicine is more focused on chronically treating symptoms instead of focusing on the individual's molecular profile. And due to the disease heterogeneity, this has been proven to be inefficient. If we were able to classify patients according to their molecular characteristics, we could propose drugs in order to treat a specific responsive subgroup of patients. And also, we have to take into account the patient heterogeneity, as we all have some genetic polymorphisms which affect the effectivity and the toxicity of the drugs administered. And it's also influenced by our lifestyle and our habits. Now, in the context of drug repurposing, this NET project incorporates biomedical knowledge for both structured and unstructured data sources in order to provide researchers with data and methodologies in order to better understand diseases and also propose some new drug repurposing hypotheses. It's a relational database which is divided in 3 different layers: phenotypical, biological, and drugs layer. So, the main objective of this work is to explore the current landscape of clinical trials involving drugs and diseases known to have participated in drug repurposing successful scenarios. Moving to the methodology. So, the initial dataset was taken from the literature. We took from the basis of the repurposing cases, which were consisted on drug disease pairs. The diseases were identified by the CUI and the drugs identified by the Chembel ID, and also they were mapped into these NET vocabularies. So, the initial dataset consisted on 81 disease drug pairs. This was the initial input to clinicaltrials.gov API, in which we retrieved the national clinical trial ID, the condition name, and also the intervention name. This was because when searching in the clinicaltrials.gov API, the API searches the names in all the clinical trial record, including the exclusion criteria. So the next step was to map it with the initial dataset. And then we kept all the disease drug pairs with more than 15 associated studies. Now, this was the total number of studies and correspond to 55 drug disease pairs. The next step was connecting to the AACT in order to filter by intervention type drug, and we ended up with around 2,800 studies corresponding to 55 drug disease pairs. From the AACT, we retrieved information from 3 different tables. The studies table contained the basic information of each clinical trial, as for example the title or the status. Then from the statistics table, contains information about the statistical outcomes from each clinical trial, like confidence intervals, p-values, methods. And then the eligibilities table stores the information about the participants, for example, the age of the gender. Now, then we performed some filtering and harmonization of the data, and we ended up with a total of 408 unique MCT IDs corresponding to 39 disease drug pairs. Now, on another experiment, we did the same strategy, but separating in two different data sets, the drugs and the diseases. For the drugs, from the 55 initial drug disease pairs, we have a total of 29 unique drugs. These 29 unique drugs were the input of the clinicaltrials.gov API. We return all the studies corresponding to these 29 drugs, and then we filter in the AACT by intervention type drug. In this case, we only retrieve information from the studies table, and we perform the same filtering and harmonization of the data, ending up with around 2,000 studies corresponding to these 29 drugs. And in the case of the diseases, we did the same. We have, in this case, 47 unique diseases, but we discarded malignant neoplasms because it was too general disease. And then we did the same. We filtered by intervention type drug, and we extracted the information from the studies table. And we ended up with around 13,000 studies corresponding to 43 diseases. With all of this data we have collected, we performed some descriptive analysis focusing on certain features of the data. For example, the study type, the study phase. According to the statistics table, we studied the statistical method used to calculate the significance of the outcomes. And from the eligibilities table, for the sex of the participants, the age intervals, if the study permits the participation of healthy volunteers, and also a comparative analysis with the data sets from the drugs and the diseases. Now, moving to results. According to the study type and phase, the normal trend is to combine all types of studies when performing, when studying a specific disease drug pair. We can divide it according to the study type in interventional and observational, and then according to the study phase, the interventional studies can be divided into phases, which is the orange column, and we have a total of 5 drug disease pairs, which are exclusively this type of study and phase. Then we have interventional studies which are not divided into phases, which is the blue column, and we have also 5 drug disease pairs which are have only clinical trials performed in this type. And then observational studies, the same, is an independent study type, and we have a total of 4 drug disease pairs exclusively for this type. Now, according to the statistical method, normally the mean is to use around 2 statistical methods for each drug disease pair, and but studying this feature, we get to the conclusion that there's not like a clear relationship between the number of statistical methods used and the number of studies for each drug disease pair. So we cannot say that it's yet like a guideline to calculate the significance of the clinical trial outcomes. Now, moving to the participants' features, according to the sex-based studies, from the 39 disease drug pairs, we have information of the participants of 19 of them. From these 19, we have 8 of them were exclusively for one sex. In most cases are diseases which only affect one sex, like prostatic hyperplasia, breast carcinoma, but we have 2 exceptions, which is urinary stress incontinence and osteoporosis, which, although it affects both sex, here it's only studied in women. Other features, according to the age of the participants, in most of the cases there is no any division in the age of the participants when participating in clinical trials, but we found differences in these 2 drug disease pairs, the idiopathic pulmonary arterial hypertension with sildenafil and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder with atomoxetine, which, if you can see, there is like a cutoff at 20 years old, and the clinical trials are divided in studying this pair in people younger than 20 years old or older. Also, 90.44% of the studies in our dataset do not accept healthy volunteers, only work with people who have the disease, but the only drug disease pair which are maybe higher proportion of healthy volunteers is obesity with sibutramine, but it's not significant. And then the comparative analysis performed with independent drugs and disease datasets. The goal was to compare the number of studies for each drug which are dedicated to drug repurposing versus the total number of studies of all clinical trials, which is the CT dataset in green. As you can see, the scale of the axis is really different, so there is not any relationship, it's not significant, the number of studies dedicated to study this drug as a repurposed drug. Only we can say that the proportion is slightly higher in atomoxetine, thidobudin, and methotrexate, but yet it's not significant. And in the case of the diseases, the difference is higher. Also, as you can see in the scale of the axis of both data sets, it's not significant. As you can see, the DR data set of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is slightly higher, but if you check the numbers, it's not a high proportion of the total. Now, I'm ending up with some conclusions. There are disease drug pairs that have yielded a higher success rate in studies conducted on patient cohorts categorized by age and gender. And also we can say that there are types of studies and statistical methods which are more likely to get positive outcomes, but we're not sure, it's only guidelines. And according to the study analysis, we made a comparison of between the total number of registered studies in clinical trials with the number of studies specifically focused on drug repurposing for the drugs and the diseases separately. And with this, we could estimate the proportion of studies dedicated to explore the possibility of repurposing drugs. And ending up with some limitations and the future work. The main limitation it's obviously the lack of specific patient information. In this case, we had information of the general groups that participated in each clinical trial, but not for each labeled specific patient. Also, further research is needed to explore the potential of drug repurposing in personalized medicine, and also we have to identify new repurposable drugs for the treatment of various diseases. And the future directions of this work include including more databases and repurposing pairs, also incorporating additional features such as drug-drug interactions, adverse drug reactions, and pharmacokinetic properties. And then also it would be a good point to investigate the regulatory barriers that hinder the approval of repurposed drugs, and also the social and economical impact. And this is the end of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed, and now I'm open to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for being time. Exactly 50 minutes. Okay, question from the audience. Actually, I have one. I don't know if I've lost something. I don't know if it's my fault. I noticed that you have information on groups. So yes. Features that are, yes. Don't know, based on the sex, on the age. What about introducing information about each patient? Because yes. I guess it's very important in yes. this type of experiment. Yeah. I know that you explored the disease-drug pair topic, but what in the future?
Yes, well, that's mainly the main limitation of this work. We don't have specific patient information, and it's a shame because, but the main problem with that is because in the public databases, usually it's not allowed to publish this kind of information, although it may be anonymous or something like that. But for example, in clinicaltrials.gov, there is no information of the specific patients. You have the number of participants, you have the gender, but it's general.
Yeah, you have the overall, but not the sensitive data.
Exactly. We are trying to find a way to have that information, because it would be great. It would have a positive influence in this study, but it's difficult to get that type of information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Now we go with the next, that is Belén Otero Carrasco with the paper Orphan Drugs and Rare Diseases, Unveiling Biological Patterns Through Drug Repurposing. Please.
Okay, hello everyone, I'm Belén Otero Carrasco, and I'm going to talk about my research in orphan drug and rare diseases, unveiling biological patterns through drug repurposing. I divided this presentation into 5 different points: introduction, material and method, result, conclusion, and finally, limitation and next steps. Let us start with the introduction. First, we need to know what are rare diseases. Rare diseases are a group of unusual pathologies in the world population. However, more than 55 million people suffer from a rare disease only in Europe and in the US. To date, over 6,000 rare diseases have been identified, and most of them lack treatment. Also, according to the European Organization of Rare Diseases Statistics, every year 250 new ones are described. Due to the scarcity clinical information and the poor epidemiological data, it's so difficult to obtain an early diagnosis and effective treatment for rare diseases. To address this problem, the Orphan Drug Act was implemented in the United States in 1993. From here, the orphan drug was emerged. Orphan drugs are medicine developed to help to treat or prevent rare diseases. However, despite this incentive offered to the orphan drug law, the number of approved treatments for rare diseases is so limited. Due to this, the use of drug repurposing for rare diseases is a technique that is gained more important in the recent years. Drug repurposing is a process for giving new uses to previously approved an existing drug. Also, this technique is an alternative to the novel drug developed because it has reduced time, cost, and risk. For this reason, the main objective of this study are 2. The first is to examine the temporal progression of orphan drugs since their introduction and to measure the impact of drug repurposing on treatment for rare diseases. The second is to identify biological patterns for rare diseases that may be unique to treat this type of disease with repurposed orphan drug. Moving on to the material and methods, the first point is about DISNet. DISNet is a platform that integrates biological knowledge, and all of this information was extracted from public sources. DISNet is divided into 3 different layers: the phenotypical layers, biological layers, and drug layers. The first contains the relationship between the disease and symptoms. Second, contains the relationship between the disease and other biological elements like genes, protein, or pathways. And the last contains the relationship between the disease and drug, and also other different information for the drug targets. In this next slide, you can see a summary about the material and method applied in this study. And it's divided in three different points. The first, it's talking about the data acquisition and integration. Second, it's focused on the temporal exploration of orphan drug. And the last, it's focused on the biological pattern for rare diseases. Started with the first, the data acquisition and integration. We obtained all of the data related to the orphan drug for the FDA database. In this database, we have information about the orphan drug, the rare disease associated with this orphan drug, and also the date designated for this type of drug. We do a filter and we obtain only the orphan drug approved. This is the orphan drug that we can use for treat a concrete rare disease, and we can put in the market. When we have this list of approved orphan drug, we search in DISNet and in CEMBL the CEMBL ID of this type of drug. And with them, we found in the RepoDB database that is that contain all of the information to successful cases of drug repurposing, how many of these orphan drugs are repurposed drugs. With this final data set, we started doing this first method, that is the temporal exploration of orphan drug. And the first point was to calculate the time necessary to approve one orphan drug. When we have this information, we represented temporally the evolution of the approved orphan drug if we compare with the designated orphan drug. Also, we added this temporal evolution of the repurposed orphan drug, and with this three data set, we can get an idea of the future evolution of this data, the designated drug, approved drug, and repurposed drug. Then, talking about the biological patterns for rare diseases, we started to obtain the UML SQI for all of the rare diseases considered in this study. The next step was to obtain the biological element that is associated with all of these rare diseases, and for this purpose, we use the information available in DISNet. And the third point was to create the triples that contain to the rare disease, the orphan drug, and the other disease associated. When we have created these triples, we calculate the phenotypical similarity between the rare disease and the other disease associated using the Jacquard index of similarity that you can see the formula in the slide. Also, we compare this value of the Jacquard index similarity with the general value for all of the diseases present in DISNet. And we compare these two values using a Mann-Whitney test because these data don't follow a normal distribution. The next point was to classify these rare diseases according to the International Classification of Disease. Also, we want to know if the two diseases that conform these triples, it's a rare disease or not. And we use the information available in DISNet that we extracted from Orphanet about the code for classify the diseases in rare diseases or not. The next point was to classify the orphan drug according to the anatomical therapeutic chemical code. And then the last step of this methodology was to calculate the relation between the type of disease and the type of orphan drug. With all of these methodologies, we can obtain the different results. In this first, that is related to the temporal exploration of orphan drug, you can see that the mean to approve one orphan drug, it's around 5 years. In the table, you can see that we divided all of this time in 3 different intervals. The first and the second have a mean more similar, around 6 years. But in the last, in the 2010-2022, we can see that this time is a few reduced, like around 3 years. Also, in the plot, you can see the temporal evolution of these 3 datasets considered. In blue, you can see the evolution of the designated orphan drug. In red, the approved orphan drug, and in purple, the repurposed orphan drug. If we compare the designated with the approved, you can see that the difference is more higher than if we compare with the difference of the approved and repurposed. And also, we think that in the future, this relation between the approved and repurposed orphan drug will be more close. Moving on to the part of biological patterns, the first was the descriptive analysis of the different biological elements that was associated with these rare diseases. And in the table, you can see the mean of the number of genes, pathways, and symptoms that was associated with these rare diseases, and also the standard deviation. In the other part of the slide, you can see the result according to the phenotypical similarity. In the table, you can see that the similarity between the rare disease and the other disease is higher than in the case of the general case that is present in this net. And when we're doing the Man-Whitney U test, we obtain a result that have a significant difference statistic. In the part of the classification of rare diseases, we obtained that near to the 90% of the cases, the two diseases that form the triples, it's two rare diseases. And also in the heat map, you can see that the stronger relationship between the two diseases that it contains in the triples, it's the same type of disease, is neoplasms. And the second is infectious, that is also the same time in the two parts of the triples. In the case of the orphan drug, when we classify this type of drug, we obtain that in near to the 70%, all of these drugs, the type most typical is the antineoplastic ions. And in this other heat map, you can see that also the stronger relationship between the type of disease and the type of drug, it's between the neoplasm diseases and the antineoplastic ions. Then, in the conclusion, with all of these results, we can conclude the different points. The first is the scientific research in this file in orphan drug applied to rare diseases and repurpose. It's so scarce. Also, that the repurposing of drug in orphan drug play an important role, and we will think that in the future this is increased. And focusing on the biological pattern, we have 5 different points to comment. The first is like the phenotypical similarity between the rare disease and the other disease associated. It's higher if we compare with the general cases. Second is that the most of the triples that this disease is treated with one orphan drug, it's between two diseases that are rare diseases. Also, that the disease does share one orphan drug, normally is classified in the same type of disease. And in the case of the orphan drug, we obtained that the most typical type of orphan drug were antineoplastic drug. And the last result, it's about the relationship to the disease and the orphan drug that normally is the same type. Talking about the limitation and next step, starting with the limitation that I said before, the first limitation of this study is the lack investigation in rare diseases. With this, it's so complicated to compare our result with other publication or paper related to this file. And the second was not being able to find all of the Chembel and quiz related to the orphan drug and the diseases that is present in the FDA database. And in the next step, we want to extend this study to other agencies, because for this work we only consider the FDA, and we want to apply to the different data available for example, the European Medicine Agency. And also, we want to obtain other bigger source of data to stabilize this pattern for all the rare diseases. In this slide, you can see different references that we use for doing this study. And then thanks you for your attention, and if you have any question.
Thank you, Belen. You are synchronized with the previous speaker because 50 minutes for you too. And okay, questions from the audience. I have a comment and okay, because I guess I think that the topic is very interesting because usually when you have a rare disease, this means that you are one over thousands of people, so it's just it's your problem, and so it's not convenient for the research to develop a new drug just for treating one guy, one random guy. So the problem, the topic, the repurposing of drug, it's very useful, it's very interesting. I read your paper and then at the end I've seen that in the future you want to apply NLP techniques because you want to retrieve, don't know, starting from the chemical compounds, you want to retrieve what? All the drugs that are related to this chemical compound or what?
No, it's because in the FDA database, the number of the disease and also the number of the orphan drug, it's like in a large text. Also in the case, for example, the orphan drug, it's like the chemical compounds and it's all of the number, letter and this. Okay. And also in the rare disease, it's not only one or two work to, for example, lung cancer, no, it's like a description. Okay. For it, it's like a few difficult to obtain one match with the UMLS GUI or with the Chamber ID because don't have this code or also one or two work for doing this merge. Okay. And we think that maybe this technique is useful for obtaining more data.
And you have seen in your experience, I mean, already application of this repurposing on about rare diseases?
Yeah, also we published other study, other paper that it's we develop for different computational approaches for propose new cases of repurposing for rare diseases, and we are investigating in this topic in our lab.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Let's proceed with the final presenter, Adrian Ayuso Munoz. Don't know about the pronunciation, if it's correct or not. And the title of the paper is Enhancing Drug Repurposing on Graphs by Integrating Drug Molecular Structure as Feature. The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you. Well, good morning to everyone. I am Adrián Ayuso Muñoz from the Center for Biomedical Technology at Università Politécnica de Madrid. And today I'm going to present my work, Enhancing Drug Repurposing in Graphs by Integrating Drug Molecular Structure as Feature. This is a brief index of the presentation. We'll go over the introduction, related works, materials and methods, results and discussion, and then we'll end with conclusions and future lines. First, introduction. The increasing amount of large volumes of data, biomedical data, obtained through improved multi-omics techniques has allowed science to redefine the way we conceive diseases, and more importantly, has opened new horizons in the way we can approach to generate new treatments for the pathologies categorized so far. Among these new techniques, we have drug repurposing, which is really interesting because we generate new indications for drugs that already exist. That is, we use drugs to treat all the diseases than the original ones. As we can see in the slide, drug repurposing can shorten the time of drug development up to 3 to 12 years. As you all could have guessed, if it reduces the time, it also reduces the cost and risks associated with drug development. As we can see in this slide, Of the initial 10,000 compounds that start the drug development process, only one gets approved. So we can see that it's a really costly process and the ratio of approvals is really low. Among the different computational techniques that have been proposed to tackle the drug repurposing problem, we have graph deep learning or graph machine learning. And graph deep learning is really interesting because we can predict links. Among many other things, we can predict links in these networks, which provide invaluable insights through the biomedical standpoint. In this work particularly, we'll be predicting links between drugs and diseases, which will indicate the therapeutic indication. This work is based on this previous work, which is redirection, which is framed in the graph deep learning framework. We built upon this system that was a proof of concept that proved that it was feasible to approve graph deep learning to repurpose drugs in graphs. So we'll add drug features to the graph we had in this work, and we'll see the improvement we can get. The drug features we'll use are the drug molecular structures. As for the related work we've used, this is the table of the related works we've used. These are some previous works on drug molecular embedding using graph neural networks or message passing neural networks. So we've seen some people have done it, and it's a feasible thing to do. Now the materials and methods. We also use this net. This net is a biomedical knowledge base, which my mates have talked about, but well, let me talk about it once more. We have 3 layers, which are the phenotypical, biological, and pharmacological drugs layer, in which we have the relations of diseases with other entities. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this net. This net's objective is to generate a system that periodically extracts information from medical data websites, and with that information we generate complex human disease networks. The objective is to understand diseases better, and another objective is to generate drug repurposing hypotheses. The graph we used for this work on the graph neural networks is this one. This is the meta graph. We have 2 node types, which are the phenotypes that contains diseases and symptoms, and we have the drug nodes as well, which are the ones that have the features I'm going to talk about a bit later. Those are the numbers we've got, and we have 2 relation types that are the indication between disease and drug, the therapeutical one, and the disease-symptom relation. And these are the features I was talking about. We have this drug feature data set in which we have a drug, we have its SMILES representation, and then we make a graph with that SMILES representation, which we'll embed into a code, and that's what we will use. Well, let me say, like, out of the almost 4,000 drugs we've got, there are no SMILES representation for 364 of them, so we have to approach them in a different way that I'll talk about it later. Those 300 drugs are like hormones or big compounds, and we don't have the SMILES representation in our sources. To embed the molecular structure, we use an autoencoder, which is a graph autoencoder, which is really similar to the common autoencoders, but in each of the layers we've got graph embedding layers. I don't know if you know how autoencoders work, I'm going to explain them briefly. We got an input and an output, and we compress the input, and we decompress it later, and we try to minimize the loss between the input and the output. So the code we've got in the middle is a representation, a good representation of the input. So after training, we'll throw away the decoder part, and we'll just get the encoder, and we'll use the code as our feature. So this is the final flow of information of our drug molecular information, structure information. This is a particular example of levothyroxine. We've got the drug, we get its SMILES code from our sources, and we construct a graph using that SMILES code. And then that graph goes through the autoencoder, and we get the code, which is a vector of 32 dimensions. For those diseases that we don't have the SMILES code, we just give them a random vector, because we cannot afford to lose those 400 drugs, almost 400 drugs, and we've seen it does not impact greatly the performance of the model. This is a drag repurposing model, which will make use of the features we produced earlier. And well, in the layers, we've got graph stage layers, which is a particular model of graph neural networks. We've got pattern normalization, leaky rail, like the structure of the neural network for graph neural networks is the same as the common neural networks, I guess, but just the layers change. Then we developed the RepoDB test, which is a test we use to ensure a model performs perfectly. Well, not perfectly, but well enough. We get 5,013 cases from RepoDB database, which is a database that contains failures and successes of previous drag repurposing cases, so we can use it to benchmark computational drag repurposing methods. Of those 5,013 cases we get from here, we had almost 2,000 error graph, so we delete them before training. To further test our model, we also select another 5,013 random pairs to check our model does not assign high values randomly, arbitrarily. So we've got almost over 10,000 cases for our test. Now the results and discussion. This is the graph of the distribution for the RepoDB test I just talked about. In orange, we've got the random pairs, which it could be that some real drag repurposing case is in that group, but since the graph is so large, it's like highly unlikely. And the blue ones are the RepoDB ones, so we can see that the model gets to discriminate well enough between the random ones and the drag repurposing pairs, so we can say the performance of the model is quite good. These are the performance of the metrics we report. We have the model we present here is DMSR, and we have DMSR without features because it was not fair to compare the direction with the new model directly because we made some changes and those changes have enough impact on the performance, but we see that after we add the features, the performance increased a bit more. And more than the performance improvement, we've got the model's parameters are fewer as less, so the model is more compact. This is a list of the drag repurposing pairs we propose with this model. I have to say that these drag repurposing cases have been tested. These belong to the group of the RepoDB test. So these have been tested already. For every pair, we have the disease concept unique identifier, the name, and the drag ID, and the drag's name. The repository, tables, code, everything, the results, all the drag repurposing hypotheses are in this GitLab, which you'll have the chance to scan later again because it'll appear on the bottom right. And the conclusions and future lines. We've proved that integrating heterogeneous biomedical information in the form of a complex graph has become a fundamental approach for drag repurposing and to understand diseases better. We have integrated drag molecular structure as features for drugs in our graph, and we've tested that it actually improves the performance of the model. And the DMSR, that is the model we present here, aims to generate drag repurposing hypotheses using a heterogeneous graph. It's based on graph deep learning, and it showed a good performance in a controlled environment. As for the feature lines, we like to make a more accurate and comprehensive graph. We like to expand the graph, having more features for our phenotypes. I don't know if you remember the graph, we had drugs and phenotypes. We have features for drugs, not for phenotypes. There remain the question of which features should we incorporate for the phenotypes. It's unanswered yet, but we would like to do so. And as well, we like to add more nodes and edges to our graph and make a bit more of a complex graph with more information. And as well, we like to refine the architecture, and that's basically exploring the different hyperparameters and doing hyperparameter optimization because these results did not undergo any kind of optimization. And yeah, this has been my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any comment or question, I'm at your disposal.
Thank you, Adrian. Questions from the audience, please.
I cannot hear you. Could you speak a bit? Yeah. Well, I'll go closer. Thank you. For the molecular structure.
Okay, which method you use for the graph?
It's like
because I didn't.
The graph molecular structure is embedded this way, which is.
What is the name of the method? Because they have some names like walk to back, not to back, structure.
Graph state. Graph state. This one. Graph state. Graph sample and aggregate.
Okay.
That's the one. It's a bit more complex than node to back because node to back and those things are like.
Because you lose many of the information.
Yeah, and you can only apply node to back in your trained graph, but this way, if we later on we add some nodes or some relations, we don't need to do the whole training again. Because these are called inductive settings.
How the method is working?
Yeah, I can explain it briefly. I don't know.
Yes.
Well, basically it's sample and aggregate. So having a really simple graph, we've got that node, and
Know how that sampling of the embedding is.
yeah, well, it samples a random, not a random number, a determined number of nodes, all of the neighbors, like up to 50, for example.
Okay.
Yeah, you can define that. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know which.
The sampling is
Yeah, it samples the neighborhood, just one hop neighborhood.
one.
If you wanna do 2-hop neighborhood, that is what we do. You have to stack 2 layers of that. Because you get the information of the first hop, and then you get the information of the first hop of the first hop. So it's a bit tricky, but that's the way. You have to stack layers if you want to go farther away.
Okay. And I didn't see whether you actually tested the accuracy of the model. You said something about
Yeah,
the performance of the model, but I mean accuracy.
We do not test on accuracy specifically. We test on rock curve and the PRC curve because we think those metrics are better for us. We have.
Classification to see whether that's.
Yeah, this is classification metrics.
So why only focus on the hours?
Because like we feel that these ones are the ones we need, and like we use our rock and we know our rock
Because
may.
it's a very high number. When I use graph embedding, I don't get this much.
Well, I don't know. You can get to see the code if you have any doubt. I mean, those results are there, and we've got the. Like these results have been, but multiple resample methods. So, no, repeated holdout methods. So we trained the model 50 times, separating train test validation, 50 times train, and we've got those metrics. I mean, we use our ROC and our PSC. I mean, we've got accuracy inside there, we've got precision, we've got recall,
Yeah,
but it just groups it all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other question? Actually, I have one.
That's one over there.
No. Sorry.
Okay, so regarding the features of the drugs, you said that you first map them from smiles to a graph structure, and then through the autoencoder you generate the embeddings.
Yeah, this way.
Yes. Have you tried generating the embeddings directly from the smile component?
No, because like what we wanted to do is we wanted to do a whole graph neural networks pipeline.
Okay.
So it was interesting to turn the smiles into a graph, so we could use graph neural networks because we want like whole graph neural networks pipeline. We could do smiles representation directly, and that works pretty well as well.
Okay, because in most previous works, I think that's, that's the way they go.
Yeah,
Okay.
that will be interesting to test it against that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Other question? Okay, I have one, and it's just related to the hardware you used for doing this experiment, and how much time does it require for your
Training is a
experiment?
bit hard. It depends on the hyperparameters you choose again, but training of this model, the graph is not that big, so it takes around an hour to train it, and then inference time is just like quick. Snap of a finger, super quick. So just training takes time, 1 hour more or less, then inference is instant.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you again. Now let's have the break, and then we restart in about 30 minutes.
So, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to present to you here our work about a STEAM behavior data set. It's a work that we've been doing for the last couple of months, and it's a topic, it's an application domain that we are very motivated and passionate about, and we hope that with this contribution we just convince more people to come to this application area, and also we help people already working on that to have more good quality data for training AI models. So I'm Jonathan, I'm from University of Santa Catarina State in Brazil. And yeah, I also work with my student Guilherme Ribeiro and Matheus Grelich from Universidade do Rio Grande do Sul. So let's start from the beginning. Probably some of you don't know exactly what is ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder. It's a complex developmental disorder. It is not a disease, so it doesn't make sense to talk about cure. It's not a disease, so we usually talk about therapies. Two things are very important: early diagnosis and effective therapies, so we can increase the functioning level of individuals with ASD. So ASD is a disorder that impairs the cognitive and the communication skills development during the life. It has quite high prevalence in the world. The last study showed that around 1 in 100 children are affected by ASD. Although this estimate is not so accurate because not all countries have studies that are trustable about the prevalence of autism. For example, in Brazil, we have just a few studies. In our state, for example, in Santa Catarina State, only a very old study that is not really trustable. It affects people of all ages and limits their social and cognitive skills. Of course, since, as we'll see, early diagnosis is very important, so the therapies can start the earliest possible. But it's also very hard to diagnose since the disorder is not well understood, the causes, and there is no standard test for doing that. Most of the tests, most of the diagnosis procedures are based on observational techniques. So therapists and physicians, they just run some sessions with the children, and they observe certain metrics. For example, one of them is exactly STEAMing behavior, that we will see what exactly is happening, what exactly it is. So STEAMing behavior is a short for self-stimulatory behavior. It is stereotyped and repetitive behavior that usually is used as a diagnostic criterion for defining if a children has or not ASD. And the problem is it's a very manual process, so it is very time consuming. It depends on the expertise of the specialist as well. So this is one of the factors that make hard to diagnose ASD. This is an example of hand manuring. It's one type of STEAMing behavior. But there are lots of different STEAMing behaviors. For example, hand flapping here, another hand manuring here, or spinning behavior there. There are lots of them, different ones, unusual body movements, head banging, repetitive behavior in general. Okay, so the first idea that we come up with was exactly, okay, we are in the era of artificial intelligence, so we have many different models for classification, for recognizing actions and stuff. And actually what happens is the most successful advance in AI happened when we have very good data sets, good quality data sets with curated and with characteristics as, for example, fairness and bias mitigation. And actually data sets that could also replicate real-world conditions, which is called actually in the wild. This is why that term is used in our title, in the wild dataset. All data comes from house environments and controlled environments that were just recorded. And this is important if you want to apply these techniques at a certain point. And data sets are also important for collaboration, knowledge sharing, and also for education and training. So most of the breakthrough advances in AI, for example, the computer vision advances came from the ImageNet data set. Even NLP recently have used these huge data sets that allowed to keep researching, keep looking for new techniques, and also allow this reproducibility and benchmarking that is super important so we can compare and really understand what works are advancing the literature, the state of the art. So what happens is we have lots of data sets for human action classification, so lots of data and many different actions, hundreds of actions. And actually this field is very advanced, so we have many models that are able to recognize and to classify from video what action is being performed. For example, this is one example of the kinetic data set. So we have behaviors as, for example, air drumming, or applauding, or brush painting. Some more examples from other data sets, swing, rope climbing, salsa spinning, archery. So we have hundreds of different actions. What happens is, when we tried to start to work with that, we didn't find lots of data of steaming behavior. So to the best of our knowledge, the data sets, we found only a few data sets, precisely 3 data sets, all of them in the wild data sets, so uncontrolled environments, and public available data, usually videos on YouTube, so they just gather the YouTube links and they put that to create the data set. The reason for that mostly is because of privacy and ethical issues. Since we are working with health data, it's a very sensitive kind of data, and also because we are trying to apply that on early diagnosis, so we are working with children, so it's very hard to really create a public data set and host it and provide it for everyone. This is one of the main reasons why these data sets work with YouTube links. And our data set, the data set that we are presenting here also works like that. Not all these data sets are readily available. Actually, some of them are not publicly available. I will explain that a little bit later. We have a lack of standardization as well. Some of the data sets just provide the whole video and say, okay, here there is a head bang behavior, or here there is this hand maneuvering or arm flapping, but they don't annotate and say, this is the part of the video that really shows the behavior, while other data sets present that. So they show the start time and the end time, the duration of the behavior in the video. Sometimes the video has 6 seconds, and the behavior is really in 10 seconds in some specific part of the video. Also, among these available data sets, there were duplicated videos because some of them were just extensions of previous ones, so it's really hard to work on that. So we felt this necessity of this need of, okay, we really need to build or to consolidate a data set before we start training the models. And this is our result. So I will very briefly present the characteristics of the 3 existing data sets. The first one is from 2013, the second 2021 and 22. And the first one actually is the most standardized one because it shows the start and end times of the behaviors along the video. And they have these 3 classes, spinning, headbanging, and arm flapping. The second one is not building upon the previous one. It adds a new class, which is arm flapping, if I'm not wrong. No, arm flapping, no, it's hand action, actually. And it has more data, but this is also a problem. Since they are just gathering YouTube links, at the time of publication, they had 141 clips, but when we found it, it had only 9.7 because most of the links, all these other links were not available anymore. So this was also a problem, but happily, this dataset is not public, but we contacted the authors, they provided us the links, and they provided also their allowance to publish this work, so this is good. Okay. And the last one is from 2022. This one is built on top of the first one, so this is the dataset that has lots of duplicated videos, and they both the previous one and this one, they are not standardized, so they just provide the video. They don't say in which part of the video the behavior is happening, which makes hard to compare. Authors just do by themselves this annotation, and then the methods are not really comparable. And this one also has only 3 classes. So what we've done with what we call the Autism Estimating Behavior Dataset, AES-BD, is we just consolidate and standardize the previous data sets. So we annotated the start, the duration, and the classification of the events for all the different videos. So now we have 165 clips in 4 different classes. The different numbers of videos in each class is this one. We can see that arm flapping, head banging, and spinning have more or less the same number of videos, while hand action, we have only 1/3 more or less of videos, and this is because only one of the 3 data sets have this class, but we thought that it was interesting to keep this class here. Despite probably when we are going to train the models, we are going to apply some, we are going to have to apply some kind of data balance technique or something. Something important is the videos more or less have 60 seconds of duration, and the actions, actually the average steaming duration is like 10 seconds or something like that. So this shows the importance of annotating and showing exactly where the behavior starts and where the behavior ends for achieving good results. And this is the number of male, female in each category. So we have more males than females, which actually is either a limitation of the data set, but it also reflects the prevalence of ASD between male and female. ASD is more prevalent in boys than it is in girls. So after building this data set, we didn't have time for training a model on that for CBMS, but then what we've done is we just took a very well-known and high-performing model for recognizing action, human action in videos, which is this i3D model. And we applied to our data set to see if the labels that the model will provide us was consistent with the classes that we had. And indeed, we could see that it is the top 5 classes. Here it's showing the top 5 classes from these kinetics 400, and 400 stands for 400 different actions. And if we see, for example, spinning, the top 2 are ice skating and dancing ballet. So 42% of the videos of spinning were classified as ice skating, or 38% were classified as dancing ballet, which makes sense because of the spinning. Headbanging, actually they had this headbanging class, which was not the top first one, but it was the top second, 47% of the videos. And hand action, we can see, for example, tapping guitar or finger snapping, which is very consistent with hand action, hand memory. And also arm flapping, we can see, for example, air drumming as the top second, or sign language interpretation as the top classes. So this for us was an indication that, yes, the data set is consistent, and also that the model, the general model, is not very good on detecting steaming behavior. So we definitely need models that are trained on that particular task of detecting steaming behavior on videos. What we are doing now is we are performing more experiments on ASBD, so we are exactly fine-tuning the base model, the model that we trained, that we actually test on the ASDB data set, so we can increase this performance and also restrict the classes to 4 classes instead of 400. And also we are training other models that are state-of-the-art for doing that. And something that is very promising is just trying to do some semi-supervised learning on human action data sets, those with hundreds of thousands of videos, in order to try to find on these data sets stimming behavior that could be aggregated in our data set. So that's it. Here is our data set. Please access, work on it, and let us know. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, it was like...
But if you abstract from that, it might be that this data set is of some use when you train models for the effect. Just mentioning because there are some other data sets around this area. Now my question is about the users of the data when they are ready. Is it for educating clinicians? Is it for signaling to parents who go internet and observe that their child does something strange and they go to the internet? Is it for characterizing autism symptoms in the sense that arm flapping is different from some other behavior? What is the purpose?
Okay, good question. About your comment, actually, yes, we know that there are some other conditions that have this kind of repetitive behavior. This is really good because it could be even shared. Our focus actually is on ASD, but yes, that's a good thing to notice. And about the uses, actually, when we put their education and training, we are like thinking more about the AI part of it, just trying to train models for doing the work of automatically detecting. But indeed, if you have examples of that and if you work with the specialists, maybe the videos could also, the data set could also be used for creating some kind of educational material for parents or even therapists and stuff. That's a good thing, actually. Yes, sure. See, actually, this is the first step, as I said, for building systems that could automatically detect stimming behavior. Our path, we've been working with people on, with therapists and specialists on ASD, specifically with this research institute specialized on autism. And our first step is just creating a supporting tool for them, for the specialists, so they can automatically track and quantify in a huge mass of videos and therapy sessions when the behaviors have happened for early diagnosis, but even for therapies. So if they can automatically track how many times it happened along the therapy, they can see, oh, okay, the therapy is working, see, it's decreasing without having to manually annotate. But actually in the future, maybe we can even think about like, okay, you are a parent, you just record your children and maybe it provides you some kind of, or not you, maybe you just work with some remote ASD facility and they receive those data and they can then automatically analyze it as well. Nice, thank you for the questions. No, there are also young adults, actually, and children and young adults. We are actually planning to annotate that as well, but that would be very not so, it would be like mostly arbitrary. We would watch the videos and say, okay, this is a young adult, this is a children. For the very young children, old adults, it would be easy, but then there is this gray area that you say, okay, how do we classify that? But we are going to try to do that as well.
So, then,
thank you.
Okay. I'm Francesca Marti from the University of L'Aquila, and this is a short paper, so I think that I have about 10 minutes. In this short paper we present our idea for a software workflow that able to cope with trustworthiness aspect of machine learning models to support clinical decision and clinical research. So this is the outline of the presentation. So first I introduce the problem and some challenges, and then I present our idea of this workflow for trustworthy machine learning problem. Okay, thank you. And then I make some conclusions. Funciona? Prova, prova. Okay, thank you. So just a clarification that is in this short paper we just give the idea of this workflow. So we don't have specific results. So we are working to implement this workflow on a real data set, and especially we are working to implement, to understand how to implement a particular phase of this workflow. So, to design this workflow, we take as a case study the cardiovascular disease, but this consideration can be extended also to other chronic disease, for example, cancer and so on. So in case of cardiovascular disease, this counts around 18 million deaths per year. And the situation is worsening because some recent research said that the prevalence of the metabolic disease will rise, and in 2030, 1 of 2 US adults will suffer from obesity. And with aging population, high-risk cardiovascular phenotypes will prevail and impacting on cardiovascular mortality. Though this means that there is a need to support the health system to use the huge amount of medical data, medical resources to provide more robust, more accurate disease risk prediction models, okay? To, for example, improve prevention, for reduce the cost, the time for a treatment, to suggest a treatment, to, I don't know, reduce the general cost of health system, or simply to bring out in information from data. So, of course, machine learning is the principal technique that is used to improve disease prediction or to extract information, hidden information from data. But what about the trustworthiness aspect of these machine learning models? So very, very often there is a strong lack of trust from both patients and clinicians when a result, when a prediction is given by applying black box method, okay, that cannot explain or motivate their response, their results. And also, as in the case of the cardiovascular disease, many of these approaches work on a single data source. But in the health domain, the situation is different because typically data comes from multiple and heterogeneous data sources that are typically stored in different physical locations, for example, different hospitals or research centers. And these data typically cannot be shared between the center, of course, for legal aspect, because we are talking about sensitive data. But it is very important to use all of these heterogeneous data to achieve accurate treatment, to achieve accurate diagnosis, or to make robust prediction or suggest an efficient treatment. So many papers highlight the importance of this integration of all types of data, from images or clinical data. So considering these issues, we identified some requirements that for us are necessary to achieve trustworthiness in machine learning models. And considering this scenario in which we have these different data sources, heterogeneous and different places, we think that in that case, a single machine learning pipeline is not the way to generate an outcome, especially if, for example, explainability or interpretability are to be imposed. But in that case, we think that it is necessary to learn from each data sources independently, and then put together these obtained prediction to train a new model. And also, given the mathematical complexity of this method involved in the machine learning pipeline, in the health domain, it is important, it's mandatory, to ensure that the model's result can be correctly interpreted and explained. And maybe introducing an extra knowledge in this pipeline could help in that sense, because many research papers describe the importance of extra knowledge within the pipeline. With the aims is, of course, to reduce the amount of data needed in the process, and make these approaches more robust and create interpretable and explainable learning system. So, considering these requirements, we design this software workflow for machine learning system that use these heterogeneous data sources and generate these accurate, in theory, accurate, robust predictions that are interpretable and explainable. So in this process, so we have these different data sources in different locations, and we apply a single machine learning pipeline, the classical machine learning pipeline with several stages, so data preprocessing, feature engineering, training, evaluation, and so on, to each data source, okay, independently. So the process is repeated for all these data sources, resulting in a set of models that are optimized for the specific sources. And then these predictions, we combine this prediction with an aggregated function, a general aggregated function that can be I don't know, a simple merging function or format unification, an ensemble function, so a general function. And this aggregated prediction is used to train a new model that we call hypermodel, okay? And the machine learning pipeline of this new model is composed by the classical stages of a pipeline, so data from data cleaning, labeling, feature engineering, training, evaluation, until the deployment, with two new concepts, that is the extra knowledge, the domain-specific knowledge, that in that case is the medical knowledge. And the idea is to integrate this knowledge, to integrate the rules and constraints of expert by modeled as, I don't know, maybe some rule-based system or a decision tree. And the second concept is this phase, the explainability analysis, that is necessary to comply with the explainability requirement. So actually this phase, we are working to understand how to implement in particular this phase. I'm not an explainability expert, so the problem is that the explainability methods are very domain specific. So there are frameworks that work well on a specific domain, but there is no a particular framework that is that perform better for all the domain. Okay, so there is no well-established method to integrate explainability analysis into a process. So we are it's not a difficult problem, but we have to understand how to choose the different method and how to automatically implement this phase, this choice. So in that sense, any suggestion, any comments are very, very welcome. And so in conclusion, as I said, we present this idea of this workflow that involves the use of multiple pipelines, one for each data sources. And the output generated by all the pipelines is then aggregated and used to train a new model, which is designed in theory to provide more robust predictions, implementing this explainability phase. And we also incorporated this medical knowledge, in that case, into the learning pipelines. And of course, this approach is presented here for an health domain, but can be also applied to other settings. And as I said before, this is a short paper, so we don't have specific results, but we just give this abstract idea of this work. So we have to implement these approaches on a real data set, okay? We have to implement this workflow, and for example, we want to apply this method on the UK Biobank database which contains a lot of heterogeneous data of 500,000 of people. And by using this data set, we hope to illustrate the usefulness of this strategy. Okay, so thank you, and I appreciate very if you have any suggestions about the explainability phase, and I thank you, all of you.
Introduction recommenders, and there is a chapter called Explaining Single Item Recommendation, beyond explaining single item recommendation. But this has a specific context of recommending something, I don't know, a treatment, asked and whatever, and there is a lot of different ways of recommending, and not all of it is relevant. I can keep it to the podcast. I cannot keep it to the because it's my
Later, yes,
Thank you for the talk. I actually did a project in a creative sustainability visualizations for a network that we had, and that we really try to make it very, very specific so that the clinicians and target would really understand those explanations. So basically my question is, do you actually need such a standard approach, or isn't that specific approach is better?
Sorry, it's a question or?
Basically we spend a lot of time creating one specific approach for one specific network, because then we could go more into detail what the target group wants from us. So my question is, do you actually need such a standard approach that works for everything?
You mean for all domain?
Yeah.
Actually, it's a very hard question for me because it's not so easy to respond to this question. I think it's in the medical domain, probably the external is, I'm not an expert of the domain, but I think that it's necessary for the patient's point of view or for medical point of view, because they don't trust on the prediction of these models. So I think the domain is not necessary to make these approaches more general as possible. I don't know if I answered this question, but I think that is necessary.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I think your talk is very important when it comes to clinicians trusting machine learning and black box systems. And that tells you the difficulty of and the nature of trust, which is very subjective, because clinicians classify machine learning algorithms and systems as high risk just simply because they don't understand it. I'm wondering, other than explaining the system or trying to explain something, are there other approaches, like more pragmatic approaches, to validate those? Excuse me, I'm not machine learning.
Of course, me too. So this is a very preliminary work, so we have to study about this problem and particularly about these translations of further but also for me it's a very preliminary stage. So I actually cannot correctly answer this question.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Also for me it's a very start.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to take up this to the coffee break perhaps, because we should move on to the next one. So, then let's for the next talk on detection here, we come back to the topic of autism spectrum disorder and some early detection using social media.
Perfect.
Okay. So good morning and thank you everybody for attending to this presentation. This is Martín Bayón from the University of León, and I am going to talk to you about our work together with my colleagues Rubio, Garcia, Prieto and Benitez, and we work on the early detection of ASD or autism spectrum disorder using social media text or social media information. Okay, so you may or may not know about ASD or autism spectrum disorder, but in short, it's a development disability that affects approximately 1% of the global population, and it's especially noticeable in children who can develop this condition or this disability as soon as the age of 3, and that disability can last for a lifetime. So ASD could lead to a big impact in both personal life, professional career, and in general, it means for the patients a poorer quality of life. So as many recent studies has established that an early detection of ASD may be really important for an adequate intervention to be done. So we have analyzed how artificial intelligence methods may be used to detect whether a patient is suffering from ASD or not, and this allows for specialist help to be applied as soon as possible. So among other benefits, early diagnosis of ASD may enable professionals to implement personalized treatments. Also for family and caregivers to access special resources such as therapy or counseling, or even to adapt the environment of the child to adapt to his or her necessities. Moreover, early diagnosis may be beneficial for the research community by allowing professionals to gain deeper understanding of the origin and progression of the disability. So we might say that all in all, early detection of ASD may help improve the quality of life of the patients, and that's why we are working on this topic. So currently, the ASD diagnosis is not a trivial matter. In contrast, a professional medical diagnosis is currently the way to go for detecting ASD, and this involves both behavioral history review of the patients as well as questionnaires, which might be time-consuming. Artificial intelligence methods have been used in the past, for example, using diagnostic imaging or eye tracking techniques. One may detect if a person is suffering from ASD. However, these diagnosis methods have in common the need for the patient to collaborate, to have an active role in the detection, which may cause some discomfort or disturbance for the patients. In contrast, we have analyzed how Twitter data or how tweets may be used to predict if the patient is suffering from ASD. So our work makes use of already existing data, in this case tweets or Twitter data, so the patients doesn't have or don't have to collaborate on the study. This is a transparent process for them, so no discomfort is created. In addition, our method takes virtually no time, it's very quick, and it can even be executed in an automatic way or even in a recurrent way if further analysis is needed. Last but not least, our method does not aim to replace a professional diagnosis, but to complement it, to help professionals have more tools and more ways to detect early cases of ASD. Our work includes the creation of a new dataset formed or composed by tweets of persons who claim to be suffering from ASD. This dataset was used to train several AI methods, namely decision trees, XGB, KNN classifier, as well as one deep learning method, a BERT model. Results have demonstrated that these methods are adequate for the early detection of ASD, as we are going to see. For the creation of the dataset, we extracted some tweets from accounts from people claiming to suffer from ASD in their Twitter bios. So as you may see in this image, all of these 4 cases have used some key term or key words such as autism, ASD, Asperger, ASPI, or autistic. So we labeled tweets from those people as ASD patients, and people who didn't claim this condition were labeled as known ASD patients. We have here blurred the important information for privacy reasons. So, well, we made use of the Twitter API to collect more than 1 million tweets that were later pre-processed. So, for example, deleting duplicates, retweets, tweets from other social media platforms. So our, let's say, clean dataset is composed by 400,000 tweets that we downsampled to 45,000 tweets from each of the 2 categories we have, ASD users and non-ASD users. The final dataset is composed by tweets from 252 Twitter accounts. We use this dataset to train 4 AI methods, as I said, and applied researching operation on the machine learning ones. Our results show that the BERT model, the deep learning model, acquired the best results, namely an 84.3% in accuracy. And as you may see in these confusion matrices, the BERT model is the one who has the most true positive and true negative results. As part of our conclusions, we have 4 main points. The first one is that our method has demonstrated to be useful for the early detection of ASD. The second one is that we have collected a dataset of more than 1 million tweets in raw state and 90,000 tweets when pre-processed that may be useful for a lot of purposes. Our method may help in the early detection of ASD, and this might have a great impact in the lives of many children who suffer from this condition. And in this work, we have seen, or we have observed, how deep learning models seem to have more room to improve than machine learning ones. For future lines of work, we think that further research is needed to improve the results presented in this paper. Hyperparameter tuning for the BERT model will be a very good starting point, but also we want to explore other deep learning or machine learning systems, so we are sure that no high performance models are overlooked. Well, that was all for my part. All that's left is for me to thank you for attending to this presentation, and in case you have any question, I will do my best to answer them. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation and
thank you.
congratulations for the progress. you state that you could use that for early diagnosis, but won't it be severely limited by the fact that children will have to be alphabetized and will have to be on Twitter, for example?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be more interesting, for example, trying to analyze the parents' needs about children?
Well, this work is aimed towards Twitter and the use of Twitter data for the training of the models, but it's not limited to the use of Twitter data. For example, Twitter in some countries is limited to people of 14 years or older, I think. So, for example, young people wouldn't be on Twitter, so we couldn't extract those tweets, but we could use the same trained model in other type of text. For example, I might think an result text in a test, in a high school exam or a school exam. In addition, ASD is commonly developed very soon in the life of a person, but not limited. So it could be the case that a person that not suffer from ASD during childhood develop ASD in a more mature age. So we think that this model could help detect those cases.
No, the model is so useful. I'm just wondering because you state that early the diagnosis.
Yep.
For example, within 6 or 7 years, maybe when children start to write, it's very late for diagnosis. So maybe, if you took the same approach and you try to analyze the parents, because they usually are on social networks and they talk about their children.
It might be. In our cases, I talk about cleaning the data set, and in many cases we have to delete Twitter accounts from people claiming to be parents of autism children. So when we look for autism or autistic, we found a lot of Twitter accounts that were in this case, or accounts from institutions. So yeah, it will be a great thing to think. We will think about it.
How do you state that a person is non-ASD? Because
It's very difficult.
maybe your results are even better.
Yeah, exactly. But as you may know, getting medical data is very difficult. So we didn't have access to medical history, for example. So we have to came up with an idea, and we thought that given that many autism patients disclose their status in their bios, and statistically, a person not claiming to have ASD is probably not an ASD patient, because only 1% of the population is diagnosed. We made some compromises and decided to use this strategy. Just if you claim to have ASD, we believe you, we mark you as ASD, and if you don't claim to, we mark you as non-ASD patient. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I'm thinking from technical marks. So here I see that like a binary classification problem, whether you say that a person has autism, yes or no.
Yeah.
However, it is a spectrum. So would you also add whether it's possible to predict the severity of the case?
Yeah.
The patient is available as a ground truth, so you can also like.
We haven't done it in this study yet. But yeah, indeed, we could, instead of have a binary classification, we could have a gradient. So we could say, okay, this person has a high probability of suffering from ASD or a low probability of suffering from ASD, and also in the different degrees of the disability. But we don't have, at the moment, much information about this, because our dataset is just composed of true and false cases. So, for example, as I said, we will be able to access medical information about the patients, real good data. We might be able to train those type of models. I answered your question. Okay, perfect. Okay. That was an easy one. Okay.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wonder, have you observed the contents of the tweets for example, for people with ASD? Because you said in the first question that, for example, you could apply to exams in schools for the text from exams. So maybe when people with ASD and without ASD are talking about the same subject, maybe it's not so easy to differentiate. Maybe people with ASD in your tweets are talking about ASD-specific topics mainly.
Yeah.
And maybe if you go, for example, if you use, for example, a social media like Reddit, where you have subreddits,
Yep.
you know that certain people have ASD and they are talking about a specific topic that is not about ASD, maybe it wouldn't be so easy to differentiate.
It will be harder, not that. For example, in our data collection stage, we figure out that ASD accounts usually use a lot of emojis and a lot of hashtags. And you can even see that condition in these 4 screenshots, that most of them, I think all of them, or maybe the first one doesn't, but most of them use a lot of emojis in their usernames and a lot of hashtags in their Twitter bios. So this was a pattern that was also observed in the tweets, that many tweets contains a lot of stickers, a lot of hashtags, a lot of non-textual information. So regarding the use in school or in other type of text, yeah, it might be harder, but I think the BERT model could be able to extract that information.
So it concerns that, okay, first of all, thanks for that. I do see some hope in the prediction, no matter how close we are yet. But I have a question about the sample. I mean, these are 50% autism, yes, and 50% no.
Yep.
Now, if we look at the Twitter, there are many people who have other diseases. For example, it says they are disabled, self-advocate, trauma-informed. This could fit also to a person that has an amputated arm. So have you considered samples of people who do not have ADS, but have some other neurodegenerative disorder like Parkinson's or
Okay. Okay, the only case that we take into consideration in this study is the term Asperger, because Asperger recently has been considered as a type of or a subtype of ASD. It's a subtype. I think that from 2017. I think I'm not sure. So I'm not putting my hand on fire. But we haven't considered using other diseases or other disabilities for this study. But I think that ASD is clearly an, I wouldn't say an easy one, but tweets from ASD people are usually recognizable. Even us, as we process the data, we realize when a tweet was written by an ASD patient or not. So yeah, indeed it will probably be interesting to expand this approach to other diseases or disabilities. Oh, that's a good one, and I don't have an answer for that because I I didn't know the percentage, but in our study, we try to balance the data between the ASD and non-ASD class, but that's a really good one. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you once again. So, the next talk is unfortunately online. You ready to begin?
To graduate from Zhengzhou University in China. Today I'm going to present a paper titled Construction of Chinese Pediatric Applause Knowledge Graph. The concept of knowledge graph was formally proposed by Google in May 2012. It used a graph model to simulate the relationship between everything in the world. Its basic constituent unit is the entity relationship entity triplet. Entities are connected by relations to form a network knowledge structure. The PowerPoint shows the topical knowledge graphs that are available. These are for the general domain, and these are for the medical domain. Pediatric epilepsy is a kind of common illness in childhood. The onset of pediatric epilepsy seriously damages children's bodies, leading to children's social dysfunction and learning ability decline. Intelligent medical applications can help doctors perform tasks such as diagnosis and treatment, but existing medical knowledge graphs are not enough from the perspectives of skills, specification and formalization to meet the needs of pediatric epilepsy intelligent medical applications. Therefore, we developed the Chinese pediatric epilepsy knowledge graph. We called it CPKG for short. The picture shown is part of the CPKG. The entity at the center is pediatric epilepsy. And surrounding entities such as pediatrics are associated with the entity of pediatric epilepsy by Department for Major Treatment Relation. Next, I will focus on the construction process. The construction of CPKG starts from the concept layer. We define entity type and the relationship type, and finally forms the classification system of the CPKG. Then, according to the classification system, the data layer is constructed, including data acquisition and pre-processing, automatical annotation, manual annotation, data profiling, and knowledge fusion. For the concept layer, we define 19 kinds of entities, including diseases, drugs, and so on. And we define 22 kinds of relations and 53 kinds of child relations. In this table is an example of a kind of relation and its child relations. As shown in this table, the CPKG supports topical medical data sources, including medical books, hospital information system, network data, and some private data, which can comprehensively cover most kinds of knowledge in relation to pediatric epilepsy. Unstructured data is annotated and semi-structured data is automatically extracted. While the combination of automatic extraction and manual annotated to a bin knowledge graph from data sources. While T-row beta BIRSTM-CRF model for entity identification. The architecture is shown in this picture. The model combines the feature of medical data from different sources and further trained by the pediatric epilepsy data as the target date. In this picture, 肺癌多有长期吸烟史、消瘦等症状 means lung cancer often has a long history of smoking, breathing, and other symptoms in English. It's a training test of the source domain. 70%左右新诊断的癫痫患者可以通过服用单一 AEDS 式发作类控制 means about 70% of newly diagnosed epilepsy patients can control their seniors by taking a single AEDS in English. It's a training test of the target domain. Finally, the overall entity recognition accuracy is about 80%. The results are shown in this table. We use Robita GSI-PI model for relationship extraction. The architecture is shown in this picture. 70%左右新诊断的癫痫患者可以通过服用单一 AEDS 式发作类控制 means about 70 of newly diagnosed epilepsy patients can control their senior by taking a single AEDS in English. It's the input test of the Robita GSI-PI model. In order to further improve the recall rate of relationship extraction, the method of regular expression matching is used as the post-processing of model extraction results. The final results are shown in this table. To improve the annotation accuracy and consistency, we use the developed entity and relation annotation platform to annotate entities and relations. As shown in this picture, the manual annotation process can be divided into pre-annotation stage and formal annotation stage. Firstly, we developed the annotation rules in the pre-annotating stage, and then we carried out formal annotating for 3 times to ensure the accuracy and the consistency of the manual annotating. Finally, the CPKG contains about 190,000 entity relationship triplets and 60,000 entities. As shown in this chart, entities of disease, drug, symptom, EEG, and etiology accounts for a large proportion. As shown in this chart, entity relationship triplets of post-medication performance, drug therapy, clinical symptom, department for medical treatment, and syndrome account for a large proportion. Others refer to the sum of the remaining entity relationship triplets or entities with a relatively small number. This is the end of my speech. Thank you very much for listening.
Hello everybody, I'm the reporter. Which part are you interested in?
I don't know who spoke. Good, okay. So, Xinjiang, I hope you can hear us. Maybe if you could speak up, we can know that our question is reaching you. Unfortunately, your video is switched off, so I cannot be sure. Xinjiang, so you hear us? Can we assume that you hear us? Shinxian, can you hear us? Could you say something so that we can be sure that there is communication?
Or he could use the smileys or something to...
Yeah, it might be that we have to abandon this. Okay, so Shinxian, I'm sorry. I suppose there is some technical difficulty that prevents us from communicating. So maybe we just remember the email ID on the slide and we can get in touch. Okay. So thank you again. We applaud you and we hope that you can.
Hello?
Ah, great.
Hello?
Hi, do you hear us or is this just a very, very, very long delay in the audio?
I can formulate my question and he can confirm whether he
Okay, yeah.
My question concerns some workflow with the annotations and what expertise is needed by the people who are annotating, because crowd-working literature is elaborating about skills and quality check. So are those people volunteers? Are they paid? Are they locally? What sort of background do they have?
Yeah. So, Shishan, I hope you heard the question. It's about, in the annotation process, how did you check for, what quality checks were done, because you need some expertise sometimes to do the tasks. Okay, so he has written in a chat that he cannot hear us.
Okay, then...
I'm afraid, yeah, so I don't even know how to, okay, at least find the chat button. I'm going to say thank you and sorry. But, okay, even that's not possible. But okay, so I guess we just move on, and I invite you now to talk about using range causalities in an animal learning experiment. And I guess I will try and mute.
So, welcome everybody. I am Noor Jamaluddin, and I'm a PhD student from the Faculty of Computer Science at the Goethe University in Magdeburg, Germany. And today I will be presenting our work with the title Inferring Salient Motives During Learning Experiments, and this work is done in collaboration with the Leibniz Institute for Neurobiology in Magdeburg, Germany as well. So actually in this work we are concentrating on learning. So learning, or let's say understanding learning, is a very complex task because it is the learning itself is a complex process, and it is accumulative process. Meaning by accumulative is that we are interacting with the surrounding environment, we are relying on prior experiences, okay? And the neuroscience studies are actually concentrating on or try to understand the biological mechanisms that drive the learning learning itself. However, other studies are also concentrating on behavioral data because it's important to align the behavioral data or interpret the biological mechanisms in the context of the behavioral data as well that it's collected during the learning experiment. And our focus in this work is actually going to be on the behavioral data. Here I want to introduce a small definition of what we mean by learning experiments. So as you can see here, it's a very a small example where in this learning experiments, yeah, thank you. In the learning experiments, let's say the participant could be humans or animals are exposed to a trial of stimuli. As you see here, the objectives here, the shapes. And the participant is expected to respond to these stimuli, okay, and there is some correct mapping that is defined before the learning experiment, and the participant should actually converge to find this correct mapping by trial and error. So after being exposed to a stimulus, the participant respond and then a feedback comes, okay, to say that whether the response is correct or yes or no, okay. Actually, if you look at these stimuli, they can be defined or described using some features. So, for example, here these objects, visual objects, can be described with 3 features: the size, shape, and color. However, the size here is irrelevant to the learning task, and this is important because the participant should actually identify the relevant features for the learning experiment. Not only this, during these learning experiments, there is also there are some other actions that are collected. For example, here, the speed of the response that indicates, for example, uncertainty or heart rate. So these are also important behavioral data that needs to be analyzed in order to derive useful behavioral patterns that help us in understanding the learning in general. So during learning, what's really happening is that the response to a particular stimulus relies highly on prior responses to prior stimuli, with also the feedback here. So this leads us to a well-known instrument that's called Granger causality. And this is actually leads us to the first objective of this work. So in this work, we want to actually, let's say, derive learning motives using Granger causality, okay? Learning motives that are followed by subject during the learning experiment. The other component, tool that we will be also using here is hidden Markov models. So we will be using these in order to map the derived learning motives that are represented as a set of Granger causalities, and I will talk later in details about this Granger causality, how it's used in the context of learning experiments. So in here, we're trying to map the derived learning motives into latent states that actually help us in interpreting or deriving more abstract learning phases. Okay. Not only this, but also we are interested in, let's say, identifying the salient learning motives that are followed by a group of subjects, and this is actually derived at the level of the learning experiment. Actually, learning experiments, or let's say the learning motives, are very difficult to be identified because we don't have ground truth for this. So, for example, animals, of course, cannot tell or cannot articulate at all what learning motives they have been following during the learning experiment. For humans, it's sometimes also difficult, and it is sometimes impossible. For example, if we take audio stimuli, so a person can say, okay, these 2 tones are different, but cannot tell why they are different. Okay, they cannot describe it with some known features, let's say. So what is a Granger causality? I will just say a couple of words on it. So in here, Granger causality, it is actually, here on this figure, we have a system of 3 variables, x, y, and z. And what we use Granger causality for is that we want to identify whether a cause time series, here this is the green one, the x, is actually the past observations of this cause time series is helping in prediction future values of another effect time series, y here, okay? So in order to find this effect from past to the future, we fit 2 models, okay? So for example, the first model, it actually takes as input all the variable available in the system, and another model that excludes the cause time series that is of interest, that we are interested in studying its effect. And in that, just looking at whether there's improvement in the RMC, yes or no, by including the cause time series, here we say that, okay, yes, X Granger causes Y. Okay, and we can actually define the strength of that Granger causality by simply taking the difference between the RMCs between these 2 models that fits with and without the cause time series. In the context of learning experiment, this Granger causality is used to find the effects between, let's say, stimulus features and actions. So we want to see whether an action that is taken during a learning experiment is triggered by some stimulus features, other stimulus features, or other actions, okay? So here is also another example of like a learning motive that it is actually represented using a set of Granger causalities. So in this graph here, we have an example of two stimulus features, color and shape, that is triggering an action, which is the response, and this indicates learning, actually. And the response itself is an action. It's also triggering another action, which is like the heart rate, for example. So this is an example here. However, also, like if we have these, usually like learning experiments are conducted or repeated over like, let's say time units. It could be days or hours, whatever. But here, usually the subject tends to optimize this learning motive, and it changes it over time in order to maximize the reward gain. That's why it could actually switch from one learning motive to another. So here we have an example of a learning experiment that is conducted over 3 days, and we see here that the participants started with actually only looking at one relevant feature, which is the shape, and then develops to include more relevant features in order to actually learn this or like respond to these learning experiments. So we use hidden Markov model. We simply use hidden Markov models in order to map these observations. In here, the observations are simply the graphs or the network of the Granger causalities into another latent states. And these latent states are supposed actually to reflect some of meaningful learning phases. So, what we do actually, we derive first the Granger causality. So here we have like learning sequences of learning, derived learning motives for like several subjects here, and these are the participants in that in the learning experiment. We fit a hidden Markov model on these sequences, and then we use Viterbi decoder in order to transform these or decode these learning motives into another two sequences of latent states here. And of course, like this hidden Markov model is actually it actually results in a set of latent states, and each latent states, if we are assuming that the emission probability of each latent state is a Gaussian distribution, so we can easily look at the emission probability that corresponds to each latent state and see that, of course, that can be actually characterized by a mean and a covariance matrix. So here we are interested in looking at the means of these observation emission probability distributions, so we can actually look at average Granger causalities that are expressed by these latent learning phases. As I said before, also like was part of our work is to validate the derived learning motives. We don't have a grounded truth, so we have to come up with a solution for this. That's why like here what we do is in every like learning experiment there are some groups that are known to have like expected to have or to apply different learning motives. And for example, the simplest case would be in these learning experiments is to have like learners, group of learners and a group of non-learners. And what we do is actually we use these derived learning motives in order to separate between these two groups and see and compare the results to another model. And here we are using an HMM-based classifier that is fitted on the raw behavioral data, and we compare whether these derived learning motives actually improves the separation between the groups that are known to have like different learning motives. So at the end, we would say if the separation is a good, like the performance of separation is good, we could say, conclude that these derived learning motives are valid. We evaluated our method actually on data, on learning experiments that with animals and particularly with mice. Okay, so here is like, in this learning experiment, we are interested in actually understanding Alzheimer's disease. That's why we have two groups of mice, group which is healthy mice and another group with induced cognitive impairment to simulate the Alzheimer's disease. And so we try to derive the learning models for these two groups and try to look at these learning models and look how they are like changing over time and so on. For this experiment, the mice is actually expected to run on a treadmill. And here you can see this is a treadmill of like length of 360 centimeters, and it is actually divided into different zones that it is actually characterized by haptic and by some visual clues where the animal can look at it and identify the different zones. And actually, the animal is actually receives a reward in a specific zone here that is called reward zone if it looks only in this area, in this zone, and not outside it. Okay, so the animal should learn to look in a specific zone, okay, and not outside it in order to maximize the reward, which is actually here, the animal is given some milk. Other actions were like collected in addition to this, in this experiment was the velocity of the animal and the licking behavior. And speaking of the Granger causality, we are interested in looking with effects from the this zones to the actions or the licking and the velocity. Here is the results for validating our derived learning models. So we are comparing two actually three models. One, HMM-based classifier that it is fitted on the derived learning motives alone. Another model that is fitted on the behavioral data alone. And the third model is actually trained on both data. And we see here, here we're reporting the accuracy of identifying these groups with just the wild type animals, the healthy animals, and the transgenic animals. And we see that the best accuracy is actually achieved by the model that it is fitted on the learning motives alone. The last results is actually here, you can see on the right side image here is the sequences of latent states for two groups of animals. The first 8 rows is the wild type animals and the last 12 rows belong to the sequences of transgenic animals. And if you just and they are separated with a black line, and if you look at it, you can see that there is differences that is obvious in the attended learning states. And in the table below here, we have the percentage of visiting each of these latent states, or let's say these learning motives, okay? And we can see that state number 4 is the most attended state by both groups. However, here on the left side graph, we are actually having visualizing the mean values of the Granger causalities or these learning motives here. So you can match the colors. So if you look at the state 4, we see that there is a Granger causality from position to licking and from velocity to licking. However, it's relatively weak causalities, and these actually we think that they relate to random strategies. That's why they are mostly attended by the transgenic animals. And this is compared to other states that are state 2 is also the second most frequent attended state by wild type animals. And if we look at the causalities here, so here the values indicates the strength of the causalities, we see that they have stronger causalities. In general, we found that these 3 states is actually indicates more mature learning strategies, and state 1 is the best learning motive because it has the highest range of causalities among all of these zillion learning motives. So yeah. So as a conclusion here, we said that we evaluated our method on data collected for during learning experiments on animals, and we identified 5 salient learning motives, and we found that we have like 3 learning motives that salient learning motives that relate to more mature learning motives, and we also saw that there are differences between the 2 groups. Yeah. Thank you. Actually, so I think so. When we were looking on the behavioral data, it is not really obvious. The separation based on the behavioral data is not, the separation between the 2 groups was not really obvious. So there are 2 different things here. The successful learning, okay, that it belongs to, that it actually expresses reflects the maximization of the reward. However, what we are trying to see here is a different aspect of the data, which is the learning strategies, okay? So I think that the 2 groups cannot be separated based on the behavioral data, because we also have some transgenic animals that learn the task and some healthy animals that do not learn, do not succeed, but the learning motives or the way that they are learning the task, this is the thing that could actually is different. So yeah, I think this would be the reason. Yeah.
Okay, then maybe I think a quick one. You talked about the 2 types of animals, the transgenic and the wild type. So to what degree do they differ in their behavior? So are the sick ones terribly sick and they're very easy to tell?
Actually, it was quite hard, to separate between them, just like by looking at the behavioral data. Indeed, there are some animals. Sorry. So there are if you look here, that we have 2 animals that they are following learning motives that animal 218 and 219 are following, let's say learning motives that are mostly attended by the healthy type. But it's really it was really hard to separate between these 2 groups, because we also found that some transgenic animals that could succeed in learning this experiment at the very beginning of the experiment, and also for the healthy animals on the last 2 days of the experiment. It seems that their interest in the learning experiment itself decreased. So let's say the accuracy of licking dropped. Yeah.